Attendance. The committee has under consideration the estimates of the Ministry of Municipal Affairs for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2023. I'd ask that we go around the table and have members introduce themselves for the record. Minister, when we get to you, please introduce the officials who are joining you at the table. My name is David Hanson. I'm the MLA for Bonnyville, Cold Lake, St. Paul, and the chair of this committee. We will begin starting on my right.
Thanks. My name is Joe Ceci, MLA for Calgary, Buffalo, and vice chair of the committee. Thank you.
And Shane Getson, MLA for Lexington and Parkland.
Peter Guthrie, MLA, Erdrich Cochrane.
Good evening, everyone. Cyril Turton, MLA for Spruce Grove, Stony Plain.
Good evening, everyone. RJ Sigurdsson, MLA for Highwood.
Rain, MLA, Lesser Slave Lake.
Martin Long, MLA for West Yellowhead.
I'll introduce myself then. So, Rick McIver, MLA Calgary Hayes, Minister of Municipal Affairs. At the table here, Deputy Minister Brandy Cox, Gary Sandberg, Assistant Deputy Minister, Municipal Services Division, as well as Acting ADM for Municipal Assessment and Grants. Stephen Lacroix, Assistant Deputy Minister, Managing Director, Alberta Emergency Management Agency, and Dan Balderson, Executive Director, Financial Services in the gallery. Greg Smith, my Chief of Staff. Shannon Wheeler, Deputy Minister, Chief of Staff. Sean Wasiak, Assistant Deputy Minister, Technical and Corporate Services Division. Susan McRory, Chair, Land and Property Rights Tribunal. Graham McElren, Communications Director, and J.D. Cleaver, Policy and Strategy.
Good evening, Heather Sweet, MLA for Edmonton Manning.
Danielle, Fort McMurray Wood, Buffalo.
Thank you. And sorry, go ahead, Warren.
Warren Huffman, Committee Clerk.
Sorry, I forgot about Warren there. Sorry about that, Warren. Also online, we have one member, Ms. Ahir, go ahead.
Good evening, Leila here, Chestermere Strathmore.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I'd like to note the following substitutions for the record. Mr. R.J. Sigurdsson standing in for Jackie Lovely, Heather Sweet for standing in for Richard Fian, and Martin Long for Mr. Peter Singh. A few housekeeping items to address before we turn to the business at hand. Please note that the microphones are operated by Hansard staff. Committee proceedings are being live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Alberta Assembly TV. The audio and video stream and transcripts of meetings can be accessed via the Legislative Assembly website. Members participating remotely are encouraged to have your camera on while speaking and your microphone muted when not speaking. Remote participants who wish to be placed on a speakers list are asked to email or send a message in the group chat to the committee clerk, and members in the room are asked to please signal to the chair. Please set your cell phones and other devices to silent for the duration of the meeting. The speaking rotation and time limits. Honourable members, the standing orders set out the process for consideration of the main estimates. A total of 3 hours has been scheduled for consideration of the estimates for the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. Standing Order 59.01-6 establishes the speaking rotation and speaking times. In brief, the Minister or member of the Executive Council acting on the Minister's behalf will have 10 minutes to address the committee. At the conclusion of the Minister's comments, a 60-minute speaking block for the official opposition begins, followed by a 20-minute speaking block for independent members, if any, and then a 20-minute speaking block for the government caucus. Individuals may only speak for up to 10 minutes at a time, but time may be combined between the minister and the member. The rotation of speaking time will then follow the same rotation of the official opposition, independent members, and government caucus, with individual speaking time set to 5 minutes for both the member and the ministry. These times may be combined, making it a 10-minute block. If members have any questions regarding speaking times or the rotation, please feel free to send an email or message to the committee clerk about the process. With the concurrence of the committee, I will call a 5-minute break near the midpoint of the meeting. However, the 3-hour clock will continue to run. Does anyone oppose taking the break? Hearing none, we will proceed. Ministry officials may be present and at the direction of the minister may address the committee. Ministry officials seated in the gallery, if called upon, have access to a microphone in the gallery area and are asked to please introduce themselves for the record prior to commenting. Pages are available to deliver notes or other materials between the gallery and the table. Attendees in the gallery may not approach the table, please. Space permitting, opposition caucus staff may sit at the table to assist their members. However, members have priority to sit at the table at all times. If debate is exhausted prior to 3 hours, the ministry's estimates are deemed to have been considered for the time allotted in the schedule and the committee will adjourn. Points of order will be dealt with as they arise. and individual speaking times will be paused. However, the speaking block time and the overall 3-hour meeting clock will continue to run. Any written material provided in response to questions raised during the main estimates should be tabled by the minister in the Assembly for the benefit of all members. The vote on the estimates and any amendments will occur in committee supply on March 21st, 2022. Amendments must be in writing and approved by the Parliamentary Council prior to the meeting at which they are to be moved. The original amendment is to be deposited with the committee clerk with 20 hard copies. An electronic version of the signed original should be provided to the committee clerk for distribution to committee members. Finally, the committee should have the opportunity to hear both questions and answers without interruption during estimate debates. Debate flows through the chair at all times, please, and including instances when speaking time is shared between a member and the minister. So please direct your questions and answers through the chair. I would now invite the Minister of Municipal Affairs to begin with your opening remarks. You have 10 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, everyone. I'm here today to present my ministry's 2022 to 2025 business plan and highlights of the Municipal Affairs 2022-23 budget. Joining me are senior officials from my department. They are Brandy Cox, the Deputy Minister, Gary Sandberg, Assistant Deputy Minister of Municipal Services Division and Acting Assistant Deputy Minister for Municipal Assessment and Grants, Stephen Lacroix, Managing Director of the Alberta Emergency Management Agency, and Dan Balderson, Executive Director of Financial Services. There are additional staff from my department, whom I introduced earlier, so also available to speak should it be deemed to be helpful to get the questions answered. And they will, of course, I think, introduce themselves, as you will probably require, Chair, if they are called upon. I'll deliver some remarks here and then we'll get on with the questions. Municipal Affairs budget is aligned to support the broader government strategy and goals, which includes moving Alberta forward by strengthening our healthcare system, getting more Albertans working, and bringing our finances back into the black. We are moving forward to a time of economic recovery and prosperity where Albertans have opportunities to build their skills, pursue their passions, and support themselves and their families, and municipalities need to be involved in that momentum. Our government recognizes the significant role municipalities play in shaping Alberta's vibrant communities and how they contribute to making us a stronger province. That is why Municipal Affairs is investing more than $980 million to help build Alberta communities, support them as they thrive, and keep Albertans safe. As detailed in our business plan, Municipal Affairs continues to deliver important programs and services that Albertans depend on. The ministry's work covers a broad range of initiatives, from providing local governments with capital and operating funding, to oversight of building and safety code systems, to supporting the work of the Independent Land and Property Rights Tribunal in making fair decisions on a wide variety of property-related disputes, and many other programs that have a daily impact on the lives of Albertans. Despite yet another very challenging year, we are focused on a strategic direction that will lead Alberta municipalities toward a more prosperous future. This includes the wisdom to live within our means and adjusting spending where appropriate. I will begin by highlighting some of the key changes in the Municipal Affairs budget since 2021. We have an increase of $1.2 million in funding to keep a strategic stockpile of personal protective equipment. A decrease of about $711 million in Municipal Sustainability Initiative funding, with almost $1.7 billion planned over the next 3 years as we transition to the local government fiscal framework. A decrease of $10 million related to the Senate elections and referenda from the October 2021 elections, a decrease of $2.1 million under the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, and a decrease of $500,000 from a labor mandate adjustment. In total, our budget change is a decrease of $722.7 million from budget 2021. I will explain some additional details about some of these changes and other budget commitments. I'll start with our biggest budget commitment and the biggest budget change, which is in the investment in the Municipal Sustainability Initiative program, commonly known as MSI. Investing in infrastructure and communities is key to building a prosperous Alberta. That is why we are continuing to provide significant funding to municipalities. Budget 22 provides funding under the Municipal Sustainability Initiative, or MSI, and the Local Government Fiscal Framework, LGFF. This funding will total nearly $1.7 billion over the next 3 years. Municipalities will receive $485 million in capital funding as part of MSI in 2022-23 and the following year in 22-23-24. This is a significant ongoing investment that supports local projects while building strong, safe, resilient communities. Although there is a decrease in MSI funding from $1.2 billion in 2021 to $485 million in 2022, this approach is part of a multi-year strategy to a more sustainable funding framework as announced last year. As you may recall, we increased investment in MSI in 2021 to help municipalities plan for future capital projects and support economic recovery, with the understanding that we would even out the MSI funding over several years. From 2021 to 2024, we are actually providing municipalities with an average of $722 million per year in MSI capital funding. This approach is helping our government meet its commitment to bring spending in line with comparable provinces. Fair municipal funding that is sustainable and predictable is part of this commitment, and we are taking sure and steady steps in that exact direction. As the economic situation and provincial revenue stabilize, we are working with municipalities to transition to a new funding framework. Municipalities are aware the front end loading of funding in 2021 was one of those very intentional steps forward in helping them transition to the new approach, and they are expecting the decrease in funding this year and next. I should also note that Budget 2022 includes $30 million in MSI operating grants for the 2022 fiscal year. The local government fiscal framework will replace the MSI in the 24-25, and $722 million will be the base provided in the first year of the new framework, plus the escalator clause under the terms of the local government fiscal framework. We're looking forward to working directly with municipalities on what this new funding looks like to best support them. We will be engaging with them to refine details such as the funding formula and the new program design. We are also continue to support municipal infrastructure by helping to manage the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, a federal funding program better known as ICIP. Earlier, I mentioned a decrease of $2.1 million in ICIP funding. Let me be clear, there is no change to the total estimated funding for Alberta projects. Instead, this is simply a cash flow adjustment that reflects the anticipated cash requirements based on how fast or how slow the municipalities were able to get the different projects built. ICIP is a dedicated revenue program with funding coming from the Government of Canada. While we help deliver this federal program to Alberta's communities, we also match that investment with provincial dollars. We also administer the Federal Canada Community Building Fund, and I'm pleased to say $255 million will be going to Alberta communities from CCBF. Unlike ICIP, 100% of CCBF funding comes from the federal government, and the province is not required to match that funding. While investing in infrastructure is important, protecting lives and livelihoods is also a priority for municipal affairs. This is the critical business of the Alberta Emergency Management Agency. In 2022-23, we continue to support the Provincial Operations Centre disaster response and coordination activities, including management of our very effective emergency alert system. Alberta has a strong framework in place to reduce disaster risks and respond to emergencies, and we are resilient. But there are financial limitations to what we can do. The cost and frequency of disasters in Alberta have been high in the last few years. Municipalities need to be thinking about how they can help build and support flexible, sustainable models for disaster recovery. Disaster response and recovery is a shared responsibility between all levels of government and citizens. As we announced last year, going forward, we are asking Alberta municipalities and Albertans to be prepared to contribute 10% of disaster recovery costs. Alberta's government will continue to cover 90% of those costs. Make no mistake, Alberta is still one of the highest paying jurisdictions in Canada when it comes to this form of assistance. A key objective in our new business plan is to work with our municipal partners on initiatives that help inform local decisions on reducing disaster risks. As the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us, there are things that we can't control and things that we can. Together, municipal affairs and its many partners will work hard to improve how we manage what we can control. With that in mind, we have $1.2 million increase in this budget to fund the province's investment in Alberta PPE strategic stockpile. Speaking of shared responsibilities, last year we had municipal elections ushering in new teams of local leaders. The 2021 budget for Alberta Community Partnership is $10 million less because there is no election to run this year. This funding covered a portion of the administration costs for each municipality to conduct the Senate election and referendums on behalf of the province, including those municipalities that hosted the Senate votes and referendums for neighbouring communities that were not holding municipal elections, such as Summer Villages and First Nations. The absence of the need for that funding in the new fiscal year accounts for that decrease of $10 million in our ministry budget. As Budget 22 is a new chapter in our government's commitment, I'm pleased to point out funding support to public libraries remains stable at $37 billion. Public libraries and their dedicated staff have played an important and steady role as community hubs while we've navigated the pandemic. Library boards will be eligible to receive the same amount in 22-23 as the previous year. Funding for the provincial library network also remains stable, so SuperNet connections, eConnect, and interlibrary loan services continue to add to our quality of life. In short, municipal affairs in all of its business areas is focused on building a brighter, stronger Alberta with a more prosperous financial future. Albertans are doing their part to get us there, and as government, we are doing ours by sticking to our fiscal plan. Budget 2022 helps us achieve this objective with our continued disciplined spending to maintain balance. Together, Mr. Chair, we are securing our place as the economic engine of Canada and building communities that will make us the envy of this country. Mr. Speaker, the folks in municipal affairs look forward to working closely and collaboratively with municipalities in the next year. And at this time, I welcome questions of committee members, and I thank you for your time and attention up till right now.
There's a voice of experience. Thank you, Minister, for the hour that follows. Members of the official opposition and the Minister may speak. Honourable members, you will be able to see the timer for the speaking block both in the committee room and on Microsoft Teams. Members, would you like to combine your time with the Ministers, go back and forth? Go ahead, Mr. Ceci.
Thank you, and hope we can combine our times. Yeah. So just on the whole point about the province's fiscal situation now as opposed to when decisions were made with regard to MSI and LGFF, it's a very, very different fiscal situation now. If you look at some of the charts here, when I was finance minister, I don't think we got above $64 for oil. Might have been less.
Should have tried harder.
Yeah.
I'm kidding, Mr. Speaker. I'm kidding, the honourable member.
I wish I didn't pull the. I didn't do it hard enough, but that's not the situation now going forward. Of course, my question has to do, of course, around municipalities have taken a big hit, a big haircut. They are asked to do a lot more with less. So WTI is trading well over $100 a barrel. Municipalities around the province have repeatedly said, and you said it yourself, without adequate, predictable, stable funds, they have a problem. They have had to reduce some capital investments, which negatively affects employment in our province and GDP. So my question is, can and will the government possibly rethink the delay in bringing in LGFF to 24-23, perhaps bring it in a year earlier, rethink the base starting amount for LGFF, and rethink the 50% increase to municipal revenues while provincial revenues go up $1. Those were the kinds of things that I've been hearing when I talk to municipalities around the province. They're wondering why we're not in a period of rethinking all of those things for the benefit of all Albertans and the ones we all serve.
Good. Well, thank you for the question, and let me just say that the what's in the budget is what's before us, and that's what I'm here to defend today. I don't disagree with you that municipalities always want more funding than they get, and that's not a criticism, that's their job. When you and I were municipal people for a number of years, I think we both asked for more money every single year for whatever we were involved in, because again, that was our job. So I'm not troubled by that, because that's what they're supposed to do. But we have government-wide made a commitment to bring Alberta's spending in line with the average, or more closer to the average of Canadian provinces in the different things that we do. I think this budget reflects that. If you're pointing out that the municipalities have taken a 25% haircut in their MSI capital funding, you would be 100% correct in saying that. That is true. Today, I'm only in a position to defend what's in the budget and talk about that. But in terms of changes in the future to LGFF and things like that, let me say this. I talk to municipalities all the time.
Yeah.
We'll continue to talk to municipalities all the time and hear what's important to them, and we'll hash it out. But if you're looking for a promise to do something different than what's in the budget today, I can't offer you that because I'm offering what's in the budget today.
Right. Yep.
And,
No,
and we, well, you know, we feel frankly good about it.
I get that. I get that you can't change the budget documents before us, but I'm not feeling a lot of comfort or hearing that you're an advocate, you're an ambassador for municipalities in this province, so that you will push for something different to happen because of the gusher of WTI at this point in time.
Oh, I can assure you, I'm an ambassador for the municipalities, and I think we all need to remember that while the revenues are high right now, and they may even stay high, who knows? They could fall, the bottom could fall out tomorrow. I don't think it will. I think there's a reasonably good chance that they'll stay high for a little while, although if I could predict the future, I'd be a lot wealthier than I am right now. But let me say this. We will stay in touch with the municipalities, stay in touch with what their needs are. We'll, again, constantly in touch with them, and we will see what happens. Because the other thing that we ought to bear in mind is that we still have a debt to pay back, that, you know, in the neighborhood of $90 billion. And we can't, if we can't overlook that. So, but one of the things that we feel good about is that what municipalities want with the LGFF is long-term sustainable, predictable funding. And having that escalator clause where the municipal funding in the future will go up and down
they're not keen about the 50%.
Yep, I appreciate, yes, you're correct.
Yeah. So on page 210 of the fiscal plan, we see forecast capital spending for municipal affairs at $1.7 billion roughly in the current fiscal year, going down $781 million for the fiscal year 22-23. That's roughly $1 billion cut. Well, some of this was expected. You're balancing the books on the backs of municipalities, and people are feeling it because we're seeing many municipalities come up with increased property taxes at this point. They have two choices. They can increase property taxes, or they can push off needed capital investments. That's what they tell me. They probably tell you the same thing.
Yeah, well, and
So,
let me, I'll wait. Carry on.
I'll just finish my question.
Go ahead.
Rambling as it might be. So your downloading strategy is making life more expensive for Albertans at a time when they're getting hit from all sides by increases and inflation. Grocery bills, utility bills, insurance rates, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on forever. Why are the costs, why is downloading going on to ratepayers and homeowners the single biggest thing that your ministry is doing in budget 22, in my opinion?
Well, actually, I wouldn't characterize what we've done as downloading as you have. I'd say we are taking a responsible and sustainable view towards the future so that we can keep supporting municipalities now and into the future. And in fact, to be clear, while I acknowledge that there's been a 25% reduction in the capital funding down to $722 million a year, and I think you, honourable member, know very well, because we announced this last year, that the number in the budget is 485. It's actually 722 over 3 years, but with a lot of it front end loaded last year. So if you consider that front end loading last year with the $722 million average, and you also consider the additional $500 million that went to municipalities last year in extra support during COVID, the municipalities actually will not take an actual decrease in dollars for another couple of years. It's coming. I'm not denying it. There's a 25% capital funding cut, but they haven't taken that damage yet, if you call that reduced funding damage. They haven't taken that reduction yet. It's coming, but they haven't actually had their funding reduced yet, because of the front end loading and the additional $500 million that was put into the capital program last year to help them through this time.
Mm-hmm. You know, LGAF will be 37% less if you take the 10-year average for that MSI fund. It'll be 37% less when it kicks in 24-25. And we're at a time when the revenues for the province are turned around dramatically and positively for this province. So it still seems to me that municipalities are taking the haircut for this government. Let me just move on to municipal borrowing. And you know, as part of Budget 22, the government decided to increase the borrowing rates for local authorities. I've been hearing that a lot, and you probably have too, which includes municipalities. It's increased the borrowing rate for municipalities 0.5 to 0.75%, which is effectively a new tax or surcharge where it never was before. And every single municipality and their capital projects in the province are going to cost more. So why is that happening at a time when the province is having a dramatic turnaround in its revenues?
Okay, well, first of all, let me just say that our government continues to offer what we think is convenient financing to local authorities at attractive terms and rates. The local authorities with large capital borrowing programs can now seek alternative financing options, which include accessing debt capital markets. This is something most large cities and airports outside of Alberta already do. Alberta is one of only 4 provinces that provides loans to local authorities for capital financing, and no other province provides loans to airports. The new loan pricing model still provides small and medium municipality lower loan rates than rates for other amounts borrowed. And the actual rate itself, I'd have to respectfully refer you to the Minister of Finance and Treasury Board, because that's a Finance and Treasury Board decision. You know, if you say it affects municipalities, I don't disagree with you there. But in terms of that's where that rate gets set, and I would respectfully suggest that you save that question for the Minister of Finance when you get a chance.
I get that it's under TBF, but I, and likely you, have been hearing lots from municipalities about they were surprised in November when it came forward. The rates were more attractive. I think you'll agree, they were more attractive before this new change to TBF came in.
Well, I think it's fairly, I won't argue with you that if I'm borrowing money, a lower rate's better than a higher rate. And if I'm lending money, a higher rate's better than a lower rate. I just can't argue with you on that.
Okay. When the government dismantled the Alberta Capital Finance Authority and brought it in-house to TBF, it was promised to municipalities in writing that there'd be no other changes. And obviously this is a change. Why was that changed?
It's, again, respectfully, that's a Treasury Board and Finance decision, an issue for that minister. And again, I'll recommend respectfully that you write that down and save that for the proper minister.
Perhaps you can provide me some background. Have you heard of municipalities not paying their bills to AMFC or to, you know, in itself, the province when they borrowed money? That was one of the reasons this letter from Deputy Minister Epp said, you know, there's risks on lending to municipalities. Have you heard there's problems with the lending to municipalities?
I'm going to ask my staff to, if you don't mind, MLA, I don't put my hands right on individual loans.
Sure.
That won't surprise you.
Deputy Minister?
Yeah, so a great question probably for the author of that letter. So again, just would point you to the Treasury Board and Finance estimates for a more detailed probably response than what I can offer. I think that what that is referencing is not necessarily the risk to lending to local authorities, but the fact that there is increased credit risk overall in the province. And so this is in part taking away the kind of shelter around that low interest rate that was offered to local authorities before.
Okay, so municipalities,
interest rates are increasing
municipalities
overall.
aren't the source of that risk, you're saying, I think.
I can't speak to the source, and I guess the whatever adjudication was made by Treasury Board and Finance around municipalities in terms of their level of risk and how they correlate that to the interest rate.
Okay.
But I think that my understanding was that there's overall an increase in interest rates, and that it's difficult to kind of shelter local authorities from those increases.
All right, thank you, Deputy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe we could just expand a little bit on that comment around the risk in Alberta. So the borrowing, I'm a little bit concerned about hearing about the credit risk, given the fact that there's been 0 defaults in 50 years in Alberta when it comes to the borrowing for municipalities. So I appreciate that interest rates may be going up in general, but when we're looking at the fact that we're supporting municipalities to build capital and do that investment, why would the decision around the risk be part of that conversation when in fact we haven't had that problem or 0 default in 50 years?
Yeah, I think you might want to talk to the Treasury Board and Finance Minister about that. The only thing I'll say in general terms is Alberta doesn't exist in a vacuum. We borrow money too before we lend it. So how that works out, whether our lending rates, I imagine the worldwide risk would have something to do with what our rates do. But again, it's really a Treasury Board and Finance question that you're trying to tease out here, and we're trying to help you out with that. It's probably a different ministry is where you're going to want to get your detailed information on that.
But respectfully, Minister, you're actually the Vice Chair of the Treasury Board, so you are very much involved in those conversations on an ongoing basis. So although I appreciate that the Minister of Treasury Board makes the final decision, you are the Vice Chair. And so these decisions are debated with you on an ongoing basis.
Again, you should talk to that minister, but I will say that one of the elements that affects the interest rate you pay is the credit rating, and under the previous government, we had lots of credit downgrades. Lots. At least 6. And we've had a couple since. We're hoping.
Do you want to go back, Joe? We can go back.
Your member's interrupting you. I I guess you and him have something to sort out. But let me just say that we're very hopeful. We can't guarantee it, of course, but we're hopeful, having put a balanced budget on the table and evidence to, I think, support that we intend to actually follow through on balancing that budget, that while I can't guarantee you there will be credit rate improvements, perhaps who knows what that will do to the interest rate. If we get credit rate upgrades, it won't make it worse. Certainly, we got a lot of downgrades under the previous government. I don't think that made it better.
I'm listening. Okay. Did you want me to continue, Joe? Or yeah, okay. So I guess part of what I would like to get into a little bit with you, Minister, is looking at the socioeconomic analysis for some of these municipalities when it comes to being able to do the assessment or do the investment when it comes to capital projects. We know, and you already indicated in your comments, that airports and bigger municipalities have the capacity to maybe go to a private market to borrow if they feel that they need to do that. We know, like going back to your interest rate comments though, that costs more to municipalities if you have to go to a private market, which is why there is that advantage in Alberta to be able to work within the structure that currently exists. Now, for smaller municipalities, they don't necessarily have that ability. And we know, and I'm hearing this when I'm talking to municipalities that are looking at trying to bring in that capital investment into their communities, that infrastructure is one of the biggest barriers that they have, whether it be a water pipeline, natural gas line, electrical, whatever it is that they need to do. They don't necessarily have the ability to get that capital grant money or the amount that they need to be able to get that investment into their communities. So I guess I'm curious from the government's perspective, why putting a barrier on supporting smaller rural municipalities to be able to build this infrastructure would be something that would be seen as a benefit of balancing a budget, when if it's a job creator and it's able to get more people living in smaller communities, buying into the market, being able to have employment that then creates a bigger tax base, why that assessment wouldn't be done and that support being provided to smaller municipalities?
Well, let me say this. I think in general terms, our government has created a very business-friendly environment in this province, as shown by the number of companies moving here and then the expansion and diversification of the economy, with the lower tax rates. And again, I would just say that not all investment has to be public investment. Private investment is really where we win as a society and create more jobs and tax revenue for municipalities and the province and the federal government for that matter. So I would say that the government policies, general government policies that have been put in place to have cut red tape, to have lower corporate tax rate. I know the previous government raised it by 20% and we've dropped it by 33%. And actually, frankly, collected more taxes at that lower rate. So, all municipalities, big and small, benefit from those very business-friendly policies that our government has had. And those are the things that we really think will help put wind in the sails of keeping the economy strong in the small municipalities, creating employment, creating tax revenue, for goodness sakes, to help them build infrastructure locally also.
Well, and I think we're saying the same thing in the sense of I agree with you, getting private investment into smaller communities across Alberta is a benefit to the local communities and it does raise that tax base, and I don't dispute that. But what I'm hearing is that if those smaller municipalities that don't have the tax base can't raise the funds to be able to build the capital projects, to be able to incentivize or encourage those investments, that is where we seem to have a disconnect. And the concern that I have
I think the biggest disconnect is that, with all due respect, you seem to be emphasizing the municipalities paying for all the infrastructure, and I'm saying some of it can be done that way and a lot more can be done by the private sector investors that want to build there. Sometimes they could build some of their infrastructure as well, and we'd like to think that business-friendly environment that we've tried to create very hard to create here in Alberta will really help to incentivize some of those private sector members. And so while we're not necessarily arguing, I could certainly see that I'm emphasizing the private sector contribution much more than you are.
Well, I think the reason I'm doing that is because what I'm hearing is that there is actually capital there is investment being lost in some of our rural municipalities due to the fact that they don't want to have to pay for the infrastructure because they believe that the municipality has a responsibility to ensure that the water access, the pipeline is there, to ensure natural gas access is there, as you would with any development that you're creating in a community when you're trying to get infrastructure or manufacturing facilities to build. They need access to those utilities.
Sure, and the municipalities have, we can always do more. I don't have any trouble acknowledging that, but the municipalities have lots of tools that they can use. I think they can actually provide a tax break for a period of time. It was Bill 7, I think, that we put through a couple years ago. So there's lots of things that we do to help the number of programs through different ministries, not all ours. It doesn't, I mean, ours is certainly the main connection between government and municipalities, but there's a lot of other supporting programs through ministries of transportation and infrastructure and jobs, economy, and JEI. So you know what? We try hard to put these things together to make Alberta an attractive place for businesses, whether they businesses that located in big municipalities or small. I think to a large degree, in this way, a rising tide lifts all boats, and we try to encourage that investment in Alberta for all municipalities' benefit and all citizens' benefit.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to just take off from where she left. My fact checker says 6 downgrades from your side. 1 was a double, so that's 7. I guess you win.
Game's not over yet. I think we're going to enjoy the next year or two that way quite a bit more than we've enjoyed the last 3 years.
High oil prices for sure.
Having said that, I can't guarantee it either.
I know.
We're back to that whole predicting the future thing again.
So how much additional revenue, back to this change, 0.5, 0.75, how much additional revenue per year over the fiscal plan is going to be generated from this additional tax on municipalities?
There's no additional tax on municipalities.
So this additional fee increase on borrowing?
That's mostly a Treasury Board and Finance thing. You're going to have to ask that minister. Sorry, sir. I just don't have that
So
here.
there's going to be increases to borrowing, and municipalities have told us all that they're not happy with this, but they're going to have to eat it, is what you're saying.
No, they have a decision to make. I would never tell them they have to do anything. They have one of many very hard decisions that municipalities have to make, whether to borrow the money or not. whether it makes sense or not. It's kind of like you and your family and me and my family and our
Yep.
provincial government.
Makes sense.
These are all tough decisions, and really good people get elected to municipalities to make those tough decisions, and I have great confidence in them.
It's on a different topic. Grants in place of taxes, GPOT remains disconcertingly at 50% of what the provincial government actually owes municipality. The provincial government changed that unilaterally in 2020 and instituted this reduction so that residents who live in municipalities who have provincial properties are disproportionately impacted. So for some reason, it's okay for the province not to pay its taxes, but property owners in these areas have to make up the difference. But since those decisions were made, we're in a very different fiscal environment. We've all talked about that for the last 15, 20 minutes, from when the original decision was made to download costs onto those municipalities that service provincial properties. Why haven't you, in your role as an advocate for municipalities, changed that, looked at changing that?
Well, that it would be not in this budget, which is what we're talking about here today.
GPOT's in this budget.
And I'm presenting the budget that we have here today. I think it's a very good one. What you're talking about is changes that we could consider in future years. But what we do in future years isn't really before us today. What's before us today is this budget. And in this budget, that has not changed this year.
No, it's $30 million a year. It was $60 million a year under our government. We were paying all of our taxes, but you've reduced that in 2020 unilaterally without talking to municipalities.
It's
Provincial-
again, there was no change in this budget on that. I'm not arguing with the numbers you give. I'm certainly not telling you you're wrong, but I'm just telling you that's not a change that we made this year in this budget.
Right. And that's still a problem. We see in budget 22 that the STIP program that municipalities rely on is getting cut once again. Relative to the spend projected in budget 21-22, it will be cut by $18 million or 40% through this fiscal plan. So once again, it's downloaded onto municipalities and potentially forcing them to increase property taxes. Just a few questions about STIP. Why are you continuing to cut this incredibly important support for municipalities, and how do you expect municipalities to make up the difference?
Okay, well, I'm not sure that we are because it's not my program. It's transportation's program. STIP falls under the Ministry of Transportation. I'm quite sure of that because I was that person a few months ago.
It's on page 165.
So you might want to, again, when you're writing down those other questions, write down this one and to ask the Transportation Minister, and I'm sure that she and her staff will be able to do their best to answer that for you.
Okay. Do you want to?
I will, no, I'll go. I'll continue on my rural municipality conversation.
Say, are we adjourned? Is that what you're trying to say?
Aw, come on. So, something that I would also like us to look at, again, going back into those rural municipalities, for example, the importance of having some of this capital investment. So we've heard from the city of Wetaskiwin, which I'm sure you've had conversations with them as well, that their water treatment plant isn't up to standard, which means they're going to have to do some serious upgrading and will be required to do some capital investment in that area. If that's not done, they'll start getting fined. Excuse me, fined by the federal government for not being in compliance with the new environmental standards. Given the fact that you are the ambassador for the GOA, and working with the federal government is part of the responsibility. What kind of message of trust does it send to the legislature if the things for water treatment plants and things like that, where we know municipalities are going to be potentially paying fines, isn't happening and those funds aren't being released to support the municipality to build that water treatment plant?
Well, it's, again, I think you ask an interesting question, and again, I'm pretty sure, because I was in transportation as the minister not that long ago, that I can tell you for sure that the government of Alberta funding to municipalities for water and wastewater treatment plant comes through transportation. So there's another question you might want to save for the appropriate minister at the appropriate time.
But it would be capital investment because they have to upgrade the facility. So the
Yep,
facility would
and
still
that
be
capital
required.
investment comes through transport. I'm not giving you a bad time, I'm just giving you real good, hard information. It comes through transportation.
So what if they're not able to get the facility set up in time and they're starting to have to pay those fines? As the Minister of Municipal Affairs, I mean, ultimately, that cost is going to be put onto the municipality to have to find the money to pay the fines. They don't want to pay the fines. They want to try to get this capital investment done in time. And they're not the only municipality in the province right now that's dealing with the water treatment upgrading requirements.
Well, in general terms, we try to encourage the federal government to not download things that people can't afford with their changes, standards, environmental standards go up, but that also doesn't change the fact that it can lead to financial challenges for the party that the standard's gone up on, and I think all governments need to try to be careful of that.
And so I appreciate that. I guess part of the struggle that I'm having is...
Here's the other thing too, is that we provide the MSI, and we give the municipalities a great deal of latitude with how they spend it on their capital program. So then they have sometimes another one of those hard choices about whether they want to put it towards a water treatment plant or one of the other myriad of things that municipalities have to do. So this is just in the long list of hard choices that we have to make in government. I'm sure the federal government ought to be making hard choices, and the municipalities have to as well. So it's one of, and I have great sympathy for municipalities. It's another one of those hard choices. But the MSI funding that we provide them
would be used for the water treatment plant, which is what I was trying to say.
No, it would be used for what they choose to use it for.
But when municipalities, and this is not, again, the only municipality that is dealing with this issue, has been told that they now don't meet the environmental standards that are required, there are a few municipalities that are being forced to deal with this very issue. And the issue is either increasing their property taxes so they can get the money that they need from their community members, their citizens, to help pay for this. Part of it would have come through their MSI funding, and they would have had to allocate it through MSI because of the fact that they are now being mandated to hit this target, and that funding is being cut. And so it is creating stress, and there are other municipalities that are feeling the burden of this, that are worried about how they're going to hit this target while they're being told by this very government, who has budgeted $70 a barrel when it's currently 118, that they're not going to get the financial supports that they need to ensure that they hit these targets.
We give a lot of support to municipalities, as I said, including the things I talked about in my opening remarks and the MSI. But no matter how much support we give to them, municipalities have a tough job. They have tough choices to make. I sympathize with them tremendously. But no matter how much we help, the tough choices will never go away.
So, Minister, on page 211 of the estimates from last year, you committed to $124 million in municipal waste management infrastructure grants to municipalities under your ministry. Now you're projecting to spend only $73 million. That's a 41% decline. So it is page 211. That was last year's budgeted number, $124 million to municipal waste management infrastructure. It's now 41% less. And we know, and we have municipalities that are coming forward saying that they need this support.
Again, Minister of Transportation, that's where that question belongs. Wastewater management is, I'm not trying to be smart, but I've said it several times, water management and wastewater management capital programs are through the Ministry of Transportation.
Joe, are you ready?
Yeah. Page 90 of the business plan, there's a reference to 24/7 watch station. I don't know what that is. What is it?
I didn't actually hear what you said, so I don't know what it is either.
Yeah, 24/7 watch station.
24/7 watch station.
Just one on, Mr. Thank you, Honorable Member, Mr. Chair. So the Provincial Operations Center operates 24/7.
Op station. Okay. So.
Yeah. So whether we're managing an emergency or not, there's always somebody 24/7 manning the phone, the computer network, and being connected to first responders across the province and indeed the federal government. So that's what this is all about,
Yeah,
sir.
I assumed it was at the POC, but I didn't know it just implied somebody at the POC is there 24/7.
Yeah, exactly. We call them our PDOs, our provincial duty officers.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I think off the top you talked about extreme weather events, Minister, and disaster support. That seems like it's going to be happening a lot going forward. You know, it's not a
I have
matter.
no idea.
It's not a matter of.
I can talk about a
Yes.
bit about what's happened in the past, but I do not have any idea
I know.
what events are going to happen in the future.
So I'm just wondering, in this budget, there seems to be a cut to climate resiliency funding. Just wondering why that's there. Is it in line with the kind of fiscal?
That's a great question for the Minister of Environment when his turn comes up. And it sounds like I'm dodging your questions, but you're kind of supposed to ask questions that apply to my ministry, and you're asking all the other stuff. So, sorry about that.
That's fine. Just thinking about what you do and what you hear from municipalities, and if you listen to them and advocate for their needs with all of these cuts that are on the table. That's the question.
Yes. I talk to municipalities constantly and listen to them constantly.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So, yeah, thank you. So, Minister, we've asked a lot of questions, and a lot of the responses we have been receiving from you is ask the other minister, ask another minister, ask another minister.
Because you haven't asked the questions that apply to this ministry, which is my job to answer.
My question would be, is that you have a responsibility to advocate on behalf of municipalities. When you see a budget presented in front of you, where you see cuts in every area that you know is going to impact your municipalities, transportation, environment, all of the things, is it not your responsibility as the minister to say, hold on a minute, this is going to have a huge amount of impact on the citizens of Alberta. This is going to create property taxes to go up. There's going to be user fees in these municipalities, all of the things to pay for all the cuts that we're making. At some point, do you not go, wait a minute, maybe this is too much? And a balanced budget is good on one hand, but we also need to make sure that the services that Albertans expect from the municipalities are going to happen. Like, is that not part of the role?
Yeah, that's part of it. It's part of the role of mine. It's part of the role of municipalities. It's part of the role of all of government to make hard decisions about what we can afford to do and what's most important to do. And we spend lots of time making these very tough choices and these very tough decisions for the benefit of Albertans and the benefit of Albertan municipalities. And quite frankly, I'm very proud of the budget that's resulted in, which I'm defending my piece of here today.
So you're proud of the fact that some municipalities are raising their property taxes by between 6 to 9% on their citizens because of the fact that there's been so much cut out of their budgets?
Well, see,
that's downloading it onto Alberta.
You're making a generalized statement there, and it's not entirely fair. There's 300 odd municipalities. Some raise their taxes by more than what you just described, and some by less. And I start out from the assumption that they have their municipality's best interest at heart, and they're making those tough decisions to the best of their ability and in the best interest of their citizens. And I try to be supportive of them while they do that, knowing that they've got a tough job. And we're here to help them as much as we can.
Okay, well, let's talk about another downloading of costs then. Let's talk about provincial policing, which I do believe is part of your responsibility within municipalities.
No.
Because it's going to impact municipalities when they don't have access to the police services.
Justice. When you get the justice minister in front of you, then you should go there.
So do you believe that the 15 to 20% in the budget, the extra $12 million that's going to be downloaded on municipalities to have to pay for police services is a fair assessment to be able to put on municipalities?
Yeah, again, that's something that you're going to have to take up with the justice minister. What I can tell you is that
municipal budgets.
What I can tell you is that municipalities want their municipality to be safe. They want the police to arrive when something bad happens. They want the police to arrive in a shorter rather than longer period of time. They want the police officers to be well equipped. They want their citizens to feel safe. in their municipalities. And again, it's like municipalities don't get to look at things in isolation, and neither do we. We have a lot of conflicting things, but at the core of it, if you're talking about police funding, you need to talk to the justice minister in this budget process.
And I agree, but what I'm hearing from municipal leaders is that they're paying more and they don't actually have any more boots on the ground.
And I'm sure the justice minister will be happy to talk to you about that if you wait until that time comes.
But the issue here,
Noted, go ahead, Mr. Turton.
3B speaks to the matters other than the question under discussion. The honorable member even articulated that she was asking questions that were outside of the purview of municipal affairs. I'm very excited to know what the opposition has in terms of their questions about the budget that's before us, the numbers, the business plans, the reason that we're all here tonight. And so I would just ask that the honorable member please stick to municipal affairs versus a whole wide array of different ministries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, would you like to respond?
I can respond.
you.
I appreciate that the minister doesn't like the questions that I'm asking. However, it's not a point of order, it's a matter of debate. The reality of it is that every municipality, as the minister has already clearly said, impacts every decision that happens to a municipality. He has actually commented on the fact that although it may not be under his ministry, it does impact the decisions that municipalities have to make. So we're trying to...
Even though they haven't done their homework.
So my point is that when we're building the conversation around the budget and the cuts that have happened within the budget and the impact of municipalities, there are many different intersecting things that do impact his ministry.
Members are prepared to rule on this. I've allowed a lot of latitude. I think we've covered the Treasury Board and Finance, transportation, justice, environment, and parks so far. And I've heard very, very few questions that reference a line item in this budget, which we're here. We've got 3 hours to cover this. It's a very, very important ministry to the province, and I think we should stick to the questions that are within the purview of this minister to answer. He's tried to do his best, I think, and I think he must have done a heck of a good job on the budget, because there doesn't seem to be any questions arising from the opposition in regards to his ministry. So please carry on with questions that are relevant to this ministry, and try and stick to that. I think it's in the best interest of Alberta if we do so.
165 of the fiscal plan, sir. I'm just wondering why, the way I read it is there was a delay in the provincial match funding in last year's budget to the tune of $82 million for ISIP federal dollars. Again, less investment across the province negatively affects employment opportunities in Alberta. Just wondering what the delay in provincial dollars was about.
Okay, I'm just, folks are trying to look that up. It's, apparently it's a cash flow issue. Lots of times the delays happen because, oh, here we go, it's the schedule of the construction. Sometimes when you try to get work done, the construction company shows up early and you need cash flow sooner, and sometimes they show up late or run into trouble and the cash flow is slower than anticipated. Construction is kind of like that, and ISIP has a lot to do with construction. So I think I'll just check with my staff. I don't think any funding was withdrawn. It just flowed at the pace it flows, right? Yeah, so it's just when the construction company shows up and works faster, then they need the money faster. And when they show up late or work slower or run into trouble, they need the money slower. And we adjust the cash flow according to what the municipality does with the construction companies that they hire to do things. And that's just one of the many services that we provide, is some flexibility in that cash flow in order to help municipalities succeed in meeting their goals and objectives on behalf of their citizens.
So the delay was because construction was delayed?
Yes, I guess, yes, that's what I'm hearing. Here we go. The federal government endorsed 13 projects in 2020 that Municipal Affairs was administering. These projects are now proceeding. They include the City of Brooks sanitary sewer replacement, horizontal lift station, Red Deer community center expansion, the Municipal District of Acadia Community Hall, Bonnyville Adventure Park, Lac La Biche County, an aquatic center, Devon, new recreation complex, Drayton Valley, zero aquatic facility upgrades, Edson, multiple recreation, multiple use facility, Millet, Agriplex, Vagreville, Agri-Food Industrial, White Court, Arts and Culture Center, Consort Aquatic Facility, Jasper Recreation Facilities. Some of these projects presumably were ahead of schedule, some were behind, and on average, the behind amount is the amount that you asked about, and I suppose if you wanted to go to those municipalities, we could find out municipality by municipality, but the fact is, all of the money, 100% of the money from the federal government was delivered to the municipalities.
Okay.
So it just gets delivered at the pace in which they can do the construction.
I'm curious about something. The last time we were here, Bill 7 had just come in the spring, and it's a 15-year tax forgiveness for municipalities. Do you know if anybody that they can offer to economic development or businesses? Do you know if anybody...
Anybody used it? Is there any examples of a municipality successfully using that?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Okay, we're gonna get that for you.
Good.
Sorry.
Okay, Strathcona County, Wheatland County, City of Fort Saskatchewan, the town of Cardston have passed bylaws to make the incentives available in their community.
So that's 3?
That's 1, 2, 3, 4, pardon me?
That's just a few.
That's apparently a representative set. That's not an exhaustive list. That's a few examples of communities that have done this.
Downtown Calgary, any of that within your purview in terms of the city of Calgary?
The city of Calgary is a municipality, and I'm the Minister of Municipal Affairs.
Yeah.
If that's your question, yes.
So with regard to the budget, there was $5 million for downtown revitalization, $4 million for the city, and $1 million for BIAs. Is that
No, the $5 million is Jobs, Economy, and Investment Ministry.
So it's not you?
No.
Okay.
We covered 6 or 7 ministries now.
Yeah, lucky.
Well, you just got to do your homework, sir.
So we're, the municipalities have talked a lot about increased charges. Another one is probably with regard to paying more for the destruction of dangerous goods and remediation.
That's one. That's infrastructure. That's infrastructure ministry.
You know, municipalities don't really care which department or which ministry it's all about.
Well, they do.
They care
because
about the costs.
They do their homework.
And the costs are going up.
They do their
for
homework, and they get the support from the part of government that provides that support.
It's not providing the support. That's the problem, is that they stopped supporting Swan Hills, and it's charging municipalities now for that. So
And
it's just
that would be a great question for the
for-
Minister
yeah, I've
of
got that.
Infrastructure
But
when
it's-
that comes up.
but there's a theme here, and the theme,
Point of order.
The
Point of order, Chair. 23B again speaks about matters other than the ones at hand. Again, on this side, I appreciate this. It's been very enlightening to hear about all the other ministries while I'm here listening specifically to municipal affairs. But other than the educational thing, I believe the minister has tried to answer a couple of times. And with respect, if we could keep to that point, Chair, that would be greatly appreciated. I think for everybody to make the best of the taxpayer dollars here.
Thank you. Opposition members to respond to the point of order?
Oops. Sorry, Mr. Chair. Again, I think it's a matter of dispute. As my colleague is trying to indicate and trying to demonstrate, is that municipalities flows through a variety of different ministries. And although the minister will want to continuously keep putting it on to other ministers, ultimately municipalities have to interface with a variety of different ministries. And the clarity that my colleague is trying to look at is how they intersect with each other. I think trying to say that we can't say another ministry's name in conversation when trying to get clarity on behalf of municipal leaders does a disservice to the very people that are asking us to ask these questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that, both. And again, it is, I guess I would consider it a matter of debate, but please, you've got a little over 11 minutes remaining. If we could get to some questions specifically for the minister that the minister can answer, I think it would be in the best interest of all of us here and Alberta as well. So please refer to a line item from the budget or a page in the business plan with regards to municipal affairs. Go ahead, sir.
Chair, I've been more than patient. The fact is, the honourable members haven't done their homework, and then they're complaining because I can't answer questions about what's outside of my ministry. They actually need to get someone to do their homework for them before they come here.
Yeah, thank you, Minister, for that interjection, and I will encourage the members opposite or the members of the opposition to refer to a line item in the budget or an item in the business plan with regards to municipal affairs.
With the stimulus program that I think has expired, what impact did that have on municipalities?
Wow, that's in my ministry. Thank you. And that's a big question, and I could probably spend the rest of the 2 hours answering that because it was like $500 million, and it was spread out over a whole bunch of municipalities. Significant capital funding, reduced red tape. Municipalities, again, had a great deal of flexibility and influence over how they spent that money. It was, do we know even how many municipalities it went through out of the 300 plus municipalities? All of them. So there you go. There's, respectfully, if you want us to look it up and read it to you for the rest of the time, we will. But there's essentially there's essentially 300 different answers to your question, or over 300, because there's over 300 municipalities that got the money.
So
Apparently.
they got the money, and they invested it.
Yes.
And did GDP go up as a result? Did more employment happen?
Yeah, well, I'm sure employment might happen because every time you pour a sidewalk, then somebody has to do that. And every time you add on to or fix a rec center, somebody has to pay for that. And every time you do that work, and every time you pave a road, not only do they get, people have employment while they do it, but it actually creates a better piece of infrastructure for the economy of the municipality from that point forward for the next 10 or 20 years till the road needs fixing again. Over 500 projects, with a province worth over $730 million. 499 of MSP funding, plus more than 230 million of municipal contributions. So yes, I would say that it did affect positively the GDP, and probably most importantly during this time, it affected employment. So many people during COVID were out of work, and putting people back to work while building the infrastructure for the economy of the future. I just got to say I'm quite proud of and feel good about this program that we put forward, and with our municipal partners who actually had a big hand in deciding these projects. I have great confidence that they did fit. About 50% apparently was for road and bridge projects, about 21% for park, sports, and recreation infrastructure, about 15% to water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure. And others for affordable housing and other municipal buildings and facilities. Again, that's in broad terms.
That's good. No, it's good to hear some facts coming from the investment of those monies. The CARES program is not getting funded again. Why is that?
That's not this ministry.
Oh, I thought. Okay. I thought the economic development authorities were in this ministry. Not the economic development, the
JEI, I believe.
The CETA, no. All right.
Minister, if we could please, oh, sorry. Minister, if we could please look at, in your supply vote programs under 10, Land and Property Rights Tribunal.
Yes.
That is under your ministry. It's
Bingo.
even on page 176.
If we're playing bingo, you get to stand up and yell right now,
Oh.
yes.
Do you happen to know how many quasi-judicial decision-making or decisions have been made over the last year in relation to access points or land right use disputes?
We'll try to find that for you. Several other boards were rolled into one, which is now the Land Use and Property Rights Tribunal. Susan, would you mind, please? You got the expert coming up, okay?
Susan McCrory, I'm the chair. And I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the question, sorry.
So I'm looking at, wondering if you happen to have the numbers of how many judicial decisions were made this year or how many hearings have happened.
Yes, I do. Over 7,000 on the surface rights alone.
This year?
This year.
And have those all had decisions at this point, or are they
Yes.
still in review?
They're all, every decision of anything that the board does or the tribunal does has to be in writing. So each one of these is in writing. And as I say, over 7,000 just on the surface rights side. On the others, there's other work that we do. And of course, CARBs is something in the nature of about 1,800, something in that neighborhood. Annexations, I can give you those numbers.
Yes,
I can, annexations, we only had 2 annexations this year.
Okay.
But you can appreciate, ma'am, that those are monstrous files. On the, we've taken a new jurisdiction for subdivision and development appeals, 43. On the subdivision, pure subdivision, 41. Of course, we also have other work on the expropriation side. And again, those are not going to be the same kind of numbers of hearings because these are monstrous and very important ones. So it is difficult. You have to know what the volume is and the complexity of the decisions. But that is actually reflected in the annual report. So if you want exact numbers, that's where they live.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Member, do you have further questions?
So I'm still good to go. I just wanted to
Okay.
make sure that we got on Land and Property Rights Tribunal. I guess, and I'm not sure, I should have probably asked before your member sat back down. But what I'm wondering is when we're looking at land planning and development within the municipalities, if we're seeing about 7,000 decisions making, is that impacting, is that more around surface lease access for farmers and ranchers, or is that starting to look at municipal planning access? Are there themes within those 7,000 outside of just the annexation and subdivision?
As I say, the big numbers come from the surface rights side.
Yeah.
We had 6,100 applications under Section 36 this last year. And this, of course, is for rental recovery when oil companies do not pay annual rental. So we've had 6,100 applications this year. There's surface rights also deals with 5-year reviews. There's been a substantial increase in the number of 5-year reviews. And this is a review that can be brought by the oil company. It also can be brought by the farmer. We are up to, and I'll be not precise, about 480, I think, this year, compared to a much smaller number last year. The number of reviews, we also have reviews. We're almost like an appeal of ourselves. And the appeals in the last years have been 26, 27, something like that. This year, I think it's 148. So there is a big increase in the volume. What I would suggest on the other side, this would be the MGB side of the fence, although the numbers don't look much different. the complexity of the appeals has gone up. And that's measured in the amount of money that is under consideration and the number of parties that are involved. So again, it's difficult because of the various different kinds of appeals. But I think if you wanted a broad statement, you can say on the MGB side, complexity has gone up. On the SRB side, volume has gone up dramatically.
Thank you.
Okay.
There was a partnership, Minister, between AM, RMA, Government of Alberta around the Municipal Climate Change Action Centre projects. Some of that had to do with supporting Calgary with their flood mitigation plan. Some of that was the North Saskatchewan River. It was funded under the Climate Resiliency Plan, which is parks, environment and parks. However, given the fact that it was a partnership between AM, RMA, and the government, were you part of that process at all and the decision-making around whether or not that funding would continue?
That's the Ministry of Environment.
So, given the fact, though, that the intention of the project was greenhouse emissions, supporting municipalities and looking at that flood mitigation and emergency planning, why would part of that not fall under your ministry?
Because I suppose it's got to be somebody's job and we're organized. There's lots of ministries that go across government. Everything goes through justice. Everything goes through, probably finance. Everything happens in a municipality. But in order to get things done, it's generally considered good practice to have it be somebody's job. And in this case, you keep asking about things that were a different ministry or different minister's job, and they're doing it. So I suppose your criticism is that you don't like the way government's organized, and I guess that's fair enough too, but I'm not sure that's a budget question.
I think I was going to try to get to emergency preparedness, Minister.
Sorry to interrupt, but that ends that first portion of the questions for the official opposition. We'll now move on to an independent member. I see Mr. Lowen has joined us for a 20-minute block. Go ahead. Would you like to go back and forth with the minister?
Yes, please.
You're okay with that, Minister?
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minister, for being here today, and staff. Appreciate your attendance here and appreciate the opportunity to ask some questions and get some answers too. So we'll just start right in on page 91 of the ministry business plans. There's two line items I'd like more information on, both referring to the Alberta Emergency Management Agency. They're line items under both capital investment and expenses. Could you give me just kind of a bit of an idea what things would be included under expenses for the Alberta Emergency Management Agency?
Stephen, you want?
Yes, thank you, sir. Mr. Chair. So in terms of expenditures for the agency, thank you. We have, I guess I could depict it, various buckets, and the larger bucket of where we would incur expenses is the disaster recovery program. So it's a bit of a lagging process, I must admit. The disaster happened in year X. We do an assessment of, in collaboration with the municipality that was affected by that disaster. We come to a best possible assessment with the information available. We table that before Treasury Board for expenditure authority. Treasury Board says yay or nay, and then we proceed. And then those expenses lag over time, again, talking to what the Minister mentioned in terms of our ability to, and the municipality's ability to spend the money that we make available to them.
So would things like floods,
Yeah, floods, fires, hailstorms, always focus on uninsurable losses.
Yeah, okay. No, that's great. Appreciate that. And then a capital investment with Alberta Emergency Management Agency.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So the big one there would be the Alberta First Responders Communications System. This radio system is in existence in Alberta, second to none in North America, I would say, in my experience. Over 300 sites across the province. I'll give you the exact numbers. 335 sites, 164 agencies plug into the system, 38 38,900 radio systems, $270 million in insurable assets, and is directly linked to our preparedness mandate. And what that does, it provides 95% coverage of this province on all primary, secondary road networks, and also 95% of coverage in a mobile system available in 109 communities in Alberta.
Okay, thank you very much. That's great. I want to move to page 88 of the business plan. Now, it starts off saying municipal affairs leads in the coordination, collaboration, and cooperation of all organizations involved in prevention, preparedness, response to, and recovery from disasters and emergencies in the province. And it goes on to say providing strategic policy advice and leadership to emergency management partners. So when I look at that, and then we're just kind of coming off an emergency with the pandemic, and I'm just wondering, with COVID and the pandemic, it seems like maybe the government took a different route, or that maybe didn't include the Alberta Emergency Management Agency and the municipal affairs like it was maybe indicated to be. We've had, of course, we had the PIC committee, we had the COVID cabinet committee, we had AHS involved, the Chief Medical Officer of Health, and I'm just wondering, is going forward, is this still relevant anymore, or have we changed directions in government and how we handle emergencies?
No, I think if you're talking disaster type emergencies, that's clearly municipal affairs. If you're talking about COVID, that's primarily a health issue.
Okay, so
if there's a fire or a flood or something, then it would come through municipal affairs, the Alberta Emergency Management Agency.
Okay. Okay, so the emergency management is, I guess, depending on the emergency. Any other emergencies that you could see that wouldn't be taken account with this department and this portion of the budget?
Yeah,
I could take a stab at it, sir. I would maybe go into the types of emergencies that would fall strictly under law enforcement, or maybe a security situation requiring the involvement of the Canadian Armed Forces, for example, right? Although there is some connectivity between our ministry and those agencies, but difficult for us to kind of extrapolate as to what the future could look like and where we would see or not the Alberta Emergency Management Agency, although we are prepared for pretty much everything that Mother Nature can throw at us, mostly, including in our province and neighboring provinces, as well as kind of leading the way in terms of our resiliency, our capabilities, and our know-how. Unfortunately, having 6 of the largest 10 disasters in our country in the past decade. BC is going to give us a bit of a run for our money with the last summer and last fall. And we always use a bit of a feedback loop and learn from one another. So we learn from ourselves. We've had some pretty traumatic events in our province. We're looking now as to what British Columbia lived through, connected with them, connected with the entire emergency management apparatus across the country, and comparing lessons learned, including COVID, by the way.
Okay. So is there nothing that AEMA has or does that could have been useful in the situation that we were in the last 2 years?
we were involved in just helping to accumulate and distribute personal protective equipment. We worked with the community tables in Calgary and Edmonton, where there was cultural or ethnic groups that we were having a hard time reaching to get the message out about getting vaccinated. We worked with the community tables, worked with the locally organized ethnic and cultural groups through them to reach out to their members to make sure that they learned about how important it was to get vaccinated and wearing a mask and the other things that were recommended by the Chief Medical Officer of Health. That communications, a lot of that, part of that went through us. And to be clear, we reached out into the community to people that were best connected into those ethnic and cultural groups because they spoke the language and knew each other from their connections and worked with them and helped them get the message out, and in some cases had pretty darn good success. And I think there was an area of northeast Calgary that went from the lowest vaccination rate in the city, if not the province, to the highest vaccination rate in the province through this process. So there's an example, I guess.
Okay, so there is, I guess, was some benefit to the emergency pandemic that we just finished the last 2 years of, that AEMA did contribute and help.
Yeah, am I missing, is there anything else that I missed?
What I say is that the agency is structured to be resilient, is structured to be responsive, and it's got its tentacles in all the emergency management directors, deputy directors of all the municipalities in this province. So it's really, really good at pushing out information really quickly. And it's also really, really good at collecting information and needs in terms of emergency management requirements from municipalities. It also has that same connectivity with the federal government and neighboring jurisdictions, so provinces. So yes, the agency was brought to bear on a number of issues. I think the key one, which I'm very proud of, is the creation of the Personal Protective Equipment Task Force in April of 2020 that managed to deliver 100 million pieces of protective equipment to Albertans in need, focused on the non-health sector. And now we will, while we will diminish, I guess, the deliverables from that task force, it will remain ready with a stockpile of 60 days of our analysis of what could be consumed in 60 days in the non-health sectors across Alberta. So that's contracted services, it is continuing care, supported living, home care, first responders, the government of Alberta itself. We have 60 days at the ready to respond to whatever, again, Mother Nature, or in this case, a health or a pandemic, the type of emergency at the ready going forward, to the cost of 1.2 million if we go back to the budget line item.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So going back to page 88 again, one of the responsibilities or duties or the support you provide is maintaining Alberta Emergency Alert. And so I did have somebody contact my office asking about the plan to switch to the federal emergency system. Now, is there money for Alberta's current emergency alert system included in these light items in the budget and forecasted numbers for 2021, 2022?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chair, so there is $1.91 million assigned to maintaining the Alberta emergency alert system. The member is not incorrect when he is relating a conversation that there is more than a desire. We are migrating our system eventually to the national alerting system, which is more modern and free, by the way. Free is always good. But we will not let go of what we have until we have assurances from the federal government that the system that they will offer us answers our needs. There's also another little tidbit attached to this alerting system, which is the alert app or the application. This we will retain as the federal government hasn't figured out a way to do that, or hasn't assigned the necessary monies to do so. So again, to recapitulate, the reason why this is getting a fair amount of heat and light right now is because the evacuation of Abbotsford during the floods last fall was signaled by an American system across the border, not the British Columbia government or its emergency management agency, triggering an alert to evacuate Abbotsford. Albeit Alberta is ready. We've made use of that system many times over the past years, learning from our own lessons. It doesn't satisfy every single Albertan 100% of the time, because it does go off in the middle of class or at night. But my focus is the security, safety, and resiliency of the entire apparatus. So we are keeping our system. We're still investing until the federal government gives us something better.
So would you be expecting to see a $1.9 million benefit to going to the federal system?
No, the 1.9 million is for our own expenditure, so that app I was talking about, and then maintaining our own contracted solution through a company called Pilmorix, who runs the weather network, for example. The federal government is having a discussion, a conversation on this. The minister will participate in such a conversation actually on the 17th of March with his federal counterpart. And where the federal government takes us on this one, I think, in all honesty, is a better solution for less money. But again, I'm not going to risk the lives of Albertans until I have certain assurances that the federal system works.
Okay, so how long do you expect that might take to?
Well, CRTC is ruling on a renewed license for Pilmorix to go forward on the 23rd of August 2022. So I would say that we'll have an answer sometimes late summer as to which way this is going. But without predicting the future, again, I will take you back to my comment about the British Columbia experience. And all jurisdictions in Canada see this as a federal responsibility and a bit of a no-fail task for the Minister of Emergency Preparedness.
How many other provinces are involved with the federal program right now?
All but Alberta.
Is that okay? Alberta's the last one?
Correct.
Okay. And do you see any issues with joining in with the federal government on something like this? Obviously, right now we have a one that's provided by Albertans, and now we're going to a federal system. Is that going to be as smooth as what we have now? I mean, obviously there's some hesitancy I'm hearing, but I'm wondering where we're going to end up in this in the end. Is there any kind of feeling on where we're going?
Yeah, so my aim, sir, Mr. Chair, is to be able to deliver something that will be entirely transparent to the end user. So the branding, the interface will be exactly the same. There might be a bit of training required by specialized folks that manage these types of things in municipalities and police forces, for example. But we have no indication that the federal government would stick its neck out and provide us with a substandard solution when life and limb is involved, or are involved, sorry.
Okay. Okay, let's kind of change gears here a bit. With the changes to photo radar policy, with the 23 municipalities that relied on photo radar as a revenue source, have seen a reduction in their revenue? Is there anything in this budget to address their shortfalls?
That's a transportation question, sir.
Okay. Is there any part of the municipal affairs budget that relies on revenue from photo radar?
Nope.
No. Okay. Moving on to page 91, talking about MSI under expenses. The Municipal Sustainability Initiative and the Local Government Fiscal Framework line items. It appears that the MSI program is being phased out and replaced with the Local Government Fiscal Framework. Is that correct?
That's the plan. It is scheduled to happen on the 24-25 fiscal budget.
And how will it be managed differently? Obviously, there's a difference in amount of money being put in.
I would say to you that question has not been answered yet. We have been encouraging municipalities for some time to talk with each other. I was, interestingly enough, a municipal councillor when the MSI came in, and the government of that day, if you don't mind me, I think this is a long story, but I think it's pertinent to your question, did something that I thought was really clever on their behalf, and they said to the municipalities, here's a stack of cash, and you can have it just as soon as you all agree on how to split it up. And they left the room. Mm-hmm. So guess what? What you would expect would happen, the big cities said it should be based on population, and the most dispersed rural said it should be based on kilometers of road or square kilometers, and neither one of those dogs were going to hunt. So then a real conversation took place, and an agreement was made. So I have said to municipalities many times, and I feel good about that, is that if you make me make the decision, I will, but I'd rather have you folks agree on what the decision is on how the funding of the LGFF gets split up, because you're bound to like it more if you have your hands on it than than you will if I do my best to make you happy. So I guess the short answer, I'll finish where I started, that answer has not developed yet.
Okay. And then when I look at the MSI funds, I think 515 million. I don't see any changes from previous years to this year. I think it was actually the 485 million Municipal Sustainability Initiative. Is there anything, there's nothing in the formula to account for inflation, is there?
No.
Okay, so I guess municipalities can expect to do less with the money that they're getting.
Or negotiate a better price or something. They do the best they can with the funding that's available. I mean, what you say is a possibility. Another possibility is to get a better price. Another possibility is to do different things. I mean, yeah, what you just described a possible scenario.
Yeah, I guess with inflation, though, I think it's probably a likely scenario that they will be able to do less. I mean, you can only negotiate so much. I'm sure they're doing their best to negotiate as it is right now, so.
Those are your words, and I'm not arguing with them, but I'm just saying, you know what? Municipalities are great. They have a tough job to do. They have hard decisions to make, and as part of that, they often make good decisions and often need to be tough negotiators, and they do the best they can.
Okay.
And the other thing about it is too, we provide some flexibility in that we let them bank it, if you will, and we save it for them for up to 5 years. If there's a project they want to spend it on that 1 or 2 years MSI won't be enough to build, then we actually work with them to extend their time frame.
Okay, now the City of Calgary is suggesting that the province is taking a larger cut of the property tax bill while providing a disproportionately smaller share of items that the province previously contributed towards the city. Do you have any comments on that? You know, what is the city contribution to provincial coffers, and what are they getting back?
Well, there is no share. Each municipality sets a mill rate and collects a certain amount of taxes. So the province has very little to do with that. And the province, on the other hand, sets an amount that, on the education property tax, and the municipalities have to collect them both. They're very separate issues, even though they get collected on the same time on the same invoice.
Thank you very much, members. That concludes the first portion of questions for independent members. We're going to take that quick 5-minute health break here, but I'd just like to assure everybody that this will be the fastest 5 minutes you experience today. Please take your seats. We will now move to the government caucus for 20 minutes of questions from the members. Would you like to combine your time with the minister if the minister is amicable to that? Back and forth? Minister, are you okay with that?
I am amenable, sir.
Awesome. Thank you very much, sir.
Well, thank you for that.
Go ahead.
Do what
Mr.
we
Guthrie.
can.
Yeah, good evening, Minister, and to your team as well. Thanks for being here this evening. Very much appreciated. I'll just get us started here on the Municipal Sustainability Initiative, and then I'll kick it over to MLA Turton hereafter. On page 87 of the business plan, it describes MSI as the province's primary capital grant program to municipalities. And then page 74 of estimates explains how this initiative supports municipalities with long-term sustainable funding to manage growth pressures and key local infrastructure needs. In your introduction there, you had mentioned the $1.7 billion over 3 years. However, it's been previously announced that the program will end in 2024. So on page 178, for this upcoming fiscal year, it's including $485 million for MSI. So I guess, first off, just could you just explain or describe what type of programs fall under MSI? What kind of supports does MSI provide?
Okay, well, thanks, Chair. I would say to the honourable member that that's kind of, and I'm not being evasive, this is a straight answer. It's mostly up to the municipality. What I mean by that is, on the MSI capital funding, the municipalities have a wide range of discretion on what capital projects they use it for. I'm not sure I don't think it's unlimited discretion, but it's a wide range of discretion. And I would say in almost every case, they can find something they want to build that they can apply the MSI to. And if there's something they want to build that the MSI can't be used for, they use their other capital funding from their local taxes, generally speaking. There's probably examples where somebody couldn't build something because we wouldn't let them use MSI for that, but I can't think of one. So it's very flexible is what I'm saying. And so when it's largely up to the municipality.
Virtually any capital project.
Anything, I know reasonable is a funny word, anything that we consider reasonable.
Right.
Okay? Roads,
Okay.
sidewalks, sewers, arenas, sewer treatment, like all kinds of municipality-like stuff.
Right. So with this
Parks.
program ending, how will this impact municipalities and the projects, that they've already committed to and committed to supporting?
So, sorry, I was listening.
With the program ending?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, municipalities have asked for long-term, sustainable, predictable funding. They were asking for it when I was on council. We're trying to finally get around to it in 24-25 with the local government fiscal framework, and it will potentially be quite a bit like the MSI, but what I think it's going to be different is the municipalities are hopefully, I hope they're going to get together and agree on a different formula for cutting up the money, who gets how much, which is a little hard when you got about 330 municipalities. But it was done back when MSI came in. But one of the big features that I think municipalities ask for is there's an annual escalator clause that goes where the amount of funding will go up or down based upon whether the provincial revenue went up or down in the, I think it's 2 years before or 3 years before, but you get the idea, okay? So, and that's kind of what hopefully makes it sustainable and predictable. And as you might imagine, when they're building all these things, and sometimes a road project even can take 2 or 3 years, or a bridge project in particular can take 2 or 3 years. So having an idea how much money's coming in allows the municipalities to plan ahead, and then they can, and we even save up the MSI, and imagine we'll do the same for the LGFF. We'd save it up for 5 years. In a couple cases, they've asked us to save it longer, so they can actually plan 3 years of their, 4 years of their LGFF or MSI in advance to plan for a road, a bridge, a park, whatever it is that they choose that they want to build with it.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for that. I've been hearing the same sort of feedback in Airdrie and Cochrane, so I appreciate the feedback. And I'm going to kick it over here to MLA Turton.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you very much, Minister, for coming here today, along with the rest of your staff, to answer these questions. I do have to say that, you know, from many of the conversations I've had with municipal leaders all over the Capital Region especially, I just wanted to say thank you for your leadership and your work in the role. So I guess I'm going to ask one quick question and turn over to my colleague for supplemental, and then I'll come back and ask a couple more questions, but really has to deal with the LGFF. And as you mentioned, it will be replacing the MSI initiative in 2024. However, according to the budget of 2022, the capital plan on page 4, it won't be until 2024 when $722 million will be allocated towards this program. Meanwhile, the ministry will only give $485 million towards initiatives supported by both of these programs. So I guess my question is, can you elaborate on why less money is being allocated towards these initiatives for the next 2 fiscal years?
Okay, well, that is true, but it's not. Let me explain that. You deserve an explanation after how I started that answer. But the fact is, we told them last year is they were getting $722 million for the next 3 years. This year, next year, and the first year of LGFF. And then we said, that's true, we're not changing that. But, here's the but, we said we're going to front load a bunch of it because you're in COVID, you need to put people to work. You can probably, the market is depressed right now, so you can probably get a better deal on a lot of the work you can get, and you've got citizens that need jobs. So even though the official funding for this year is 722, and next year is 722, the difference between the 485 and the 722, we gave them last year as an advance. They didn't have to spend it last year. They could spend it last year, this year, next year, but we put it in their hands to put them in control of their own capital program. And okay, so it's, while it says 485, I agree with you. I'm telling you it's 722 because we front end loaded the difference last year. Then next year's budget says 485, and the difference between that and 722, we front-end loaded, gave them that last year as well. So even though it says 485, I'm telling you it's 722. Okay? And I think that's an honest answer under the circumstances.
No, absolutely. And I appreciate the clarification, Minister. I know it was a little bit more nuance in there, so I'm thankful that you took the time to answer that. So I'll turn it over to my colleague, Emily Sigurdsson, as a supplemental, and then I'll take it back for a couple of last questions.
Thank you, MLA Turton, and thank you, Minister, to you and your staff for being here tonight and answering these important questions. I'm going to drive a little bit more specific here under Outcome 2, Objective 2.3. It specifically states that, quote, provide capital grants to support sustainable investment in municipal infrastructure and work with municipal partners to develop details of the local government fiscal framework. And I guess as you've just explained, this year there is a reduction down to that 485 million, of course, last year's high 1.196 billion. You know, I keep hearing this over and over again. And I think we need to clarify this because there's some individuals that continue to try to say that these numbers are a reflection of our government's commitment to municipalities. And I think we need to clarify what is going on here, because I know we're seeing a bit of a better fiscal year this year, but you know, my dad always said, don't count your chickens before they hatch. So I do want to talk about that, and I generally have 2 questions, because you kind of brought something to my attention, and I want to make sure that this is clear in moving forward with the LGFF. Is you mentioned that they can carry over this investment and carry it up to 5 years. You see where I'm driving here. We got a major water infrastructure program that needs to be done in Okotoks, and what you're telling me is they can build that over a few years to be able to pay for that without having to look at finance options. Like, that would be my first question is, will that continue to be an option when we go into the LGFF? And then I guess a little bit of an explanation is, when you sat down and you were looking at this, and we understand the importance of balancing the budget, not carrying over this debt, you know, maintaining our GDP to debt not increasing over 30%, how important that was as a government promise. Can you explain how you arrived at the 485 million for this year, and provide that context to your commitment to the overall municipal capital funding?
Well, I would say it ends up, if you look at the broader promises that we made to the public when we became government here 2.5 years ago, almost 3 now. We said that we would recalibrate Alberta spending to be more in line with other provinces in Canada. We would work towards balancing the budget and while still providing, long-term sustainable, predictable funding for municipalities. And this kind of hits all those sweet spots. Now, to be clear, it's a 25% haircut, okay? Like, I'm not denying it. It's a 25% haircut from what municipalities traditionally got, and we haven't hidden from that. But I would say to you, in terms of counting your chickens before they hatch, it says 45 in the budget. I say it's 722, and those chickens hatched last year because we gave them the money last year. And next year's budget will say 485 too, but it's really 722 because those chickens also hatched last year. We actually put the money in the municipalities' bank accounts last year if they wanted it. Okay, so it's not like they're hoping to get the rest of it. They got the rest of it last year. And on top, and while it is a 25% haircut, municipalities so far haven't seen a net negative, and that's because we also spent in COVID capital investment another $500 million put it in the hands of municipalities to help them build infrastructure. So while that haircut's real, that haircut, at least for this year, next year, will be completely mitigated by the other $500 million that we forwarded municipalities on top of all that last year to help them build infrastructure and keep and build infrastructure and keep people employed and keep their economy from being flat on its back during COVID when so many things were suffering.
Thank you, Minister, for that clarification, to be able to talk about that. I know I spoke with my municipal councillors last year about what we were doing. I think that allocation of money last year at a critical time created jobs and got shovel-ready projects moving forward. So thank you for that clarification. I'll concede the rest of my time over to MLA Turton.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you again very much, Minister, for answering these questions. I will admit that with some of your stories and analogies, Minister, I was wondering if I should almost do a point of order just with your references to haircuts. I haven't had to take one of those for many years, but I understood exactly the references you were taking about that. So, but I guess a couple of questions specifically on page 87 about the MSI initiative. As everyone in this room should know, it was created in 2007 and it was supposed to last for approximately about 10 years. Now, I know as a former Muni guy from who served 3 terms in Spruce Grove City Council, from 2010 to 2017. Long-term predictable and sustainable funding was something I know that municipalities have been asking for that entire time, including my time as a city councillor. And I just find it interesting that the opposition, while they talk about the same thing, they were not heeding our calls as municipal councillors when we were begging their government to do it when they had the chance to make a difference, but I digress. So I guess my question, and I guess my comment, Minister, is that I really do find it encouraging that you're finally taking action to turn this funding into a reality, to give that predictability for municipalities that they've been asking for well over a decade. So I guess my question is, can you please describe your plan to work with municipalities to develop details of the local government fiscal framework?
Well, it's going to start off, as we've said, it'll be $722 million in 24-25, plus the escalator clause based on the change in provincial revenues up or down. That we've said. But in terms of what the formula is going to look like, I'm hoping I don't decide that. I'm hoping, and I've said this to municipalities, that they get together and fight it out and argue it out and reason it out and figure it out to come up with a formula that's fair for all or most of them. And I've said, because if you folks leave it up to me, I'll do my best. But I think if I was you, I'd want my voice at the table. So so that story, the answer to your question remains to be written. I hope municipalities can find a way individually and with their neighbors and through AUMA or AM and through RMA to hash it out and come up with a formula that's as fair as it can be, at least for all of them. And so we can just say it'd be nice for our government to say yes to them, but if they're in a big fight over who gets more money, then I guess we'll have to referee it. But I don't relish. If it's my job, I'll do my job because that's my job. But I think the wiser course is to convince municipalities to hash it out and come up with some kind of an agreement they can live with.
Okay. And I guess just a quick supplemental on that is it talks about the transition between the two programs. And I know many municipal councillors have contacted me just about their concern. Obviously, anytime you have change, there's a little bit of unease. But I was just wondering if you could explain a little bit about the transition between the MSI initiative and the local government fiscal framework, how that will work, and what type of consultation you've done with communities just to bridge that transition.
We've done some consultation. We'll keep doing it. I'll talk to municipalities whenever they want to about this stuff. But every time I do, I say, I'm happy to talk to you about it, but I really want you to talk to your neighbors and your fellow municipalities and do your best to keep me out of the decision-making tree on this. If you don't, I will have to do it. But again, it's their money to use, and I mean, there's no such thing as government money. It's all taxpayers' money. But within the realm of who gets the privilege of investing it on behalf of their citizens, they're going to be theirs to invest, and better if they can find a way to agree on how to split it up for that investment. But if they don't, somebody will have to referee it. It won't be a good day in my life if I have to do that, but if it's my job, I'll do my job.
Okay. My last question is on something I know you're very passionate about, Minister. You've talked about it a great deal, and that's to deal with library services. And, you know, I mentioned a couple times before, I had the privilege of serving as a library trustee in Spruce Grove for many years, and I know that libraries are amazing hubs in our respective communities. I know my son, he's asked me many times about why libraries are typically the tallest buildings in a municipality, and I said it's because they have so many stories. And so, but other than that, I know on budget 2.4.
And you were complaining about the haircut.
Oh yeah, I was trying. I'm an experienced dad, right? So, but I mean, my question actually has to do with library funding, because I know there was a lot of concern about long-term funding for libraries. I know in budget line 2.4 on page 177 of the government estimates includes a $36.9 million in operating expenses for library services. So my question is, Minister, is wondering if you can explain how COVID-19 affected library services across our province.
Well, I will try. Go to your local library. They'll explain it twice as well as I will right now. But nonetheless, libraries had a tough go. A lot of times because of the physical distancing and the masking rules and the limits to the number of people in a room and all the other COVID rules, a lot of them had to severely change the way they operated in order to still provide those services. But good thing for all of us is that people that run libraries are really smart and really creative, and they did a lot more online. They did a lot more order your books and then we'll put them in a package. You can pick them up on the front there. I think there's probably might even be a different answer for every library, but they all did what they could within their local municipality with their local citizens to make it work. And I thought they were amazing, and along the way they tried to do the things that outside of the entertainment and the studying things, they tried to provide the other services to through the library services, provide job upskill training, people allow the citizens to learn new things so they could get another job or get a promotion or whatever it happens to be. They were amazingly creative and varied in how they did it, and they just made it happen. So my hat's really off to the different people and the different libraries in Alberta, and they made it very little credit to me, maybe none, and that's okay. But it happened great, and the people that work in libraries made it, and our staff, they deserve credit. But I had very little to do with the amazing success that libraries had.
Well, you know, libraries just truly are incredible places. I mean, they. You know, for many residents that they don't know where to go, the library is typically the first place that they do go. And they not only are just repositories of books, they're community hubs, they're places for economic diversification and stimulus, and job fairs are there. So the fact, Minister, that you were willing to keep the funding as it was, obviously, I know will be much appreciated for many residents across the entire province. So at that point, I'd like just to turn it over to MLA Guthrie to ask see the rest of my time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You'd left me with 30 seconds here.
It's 22 now.
I I appreciate it. Okay, well, what I'll do, I'll give you the question, a little heads up to it, and then we'll face off with it next time. The unpaid oil and gas taxes, that's going to be the subject matter. We've had many discussions about this over the course of the last few years, so I'm going to be kind of interested to find out from you where we are with that.
Sorry to interrupt. Thank you. That concludes the government member's first block of questions. And despite the couple of corny jokes, I really appreciate the fact that Mr. Turton didn't mention rabbits once this year. So we will now move to 5 minutes of questions from the official opposition, followed by 5 minutes of response from the minister. As mentioned, members are asked to advise the chair at the beginning of their rotation if they wish to combine their time with the minister's time. And please remember that discussion should flow through the chair at all times, regardless of whether or not your speaking time is combined. So, members of the opposition, would you like to go back and forth? And
That's fine.
Minister, are you in agreement?
I'll accommodate the honourable member.
On page, thank you.
Go ahead, you have 10 minutes.
178 of estimates, 9.4 talks about recovery operations. Just wondering why, if we're seeing 2020, 21, 21, 22 actual and forecast going up, why 22, 23 shows a lowered amount than the forecast of $800,000.
Is it recovery operations?
Yes.
Okay, Stephen. Sorry.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chair. As I alluded to in one of my previous answers, there's a bit of a lag between a disaster happening, us determining in collaboration with the municipality the extent of that disaster, the costing of that disaster, and then petitioning Treasury Board through the minister for that funding. So what I would say is that 2020, for example, was not an inordinately high year, but it was high enough. 2021, last summer, we were very lucky, especially if we compare to our neighbors over the Rockies. But the expenditure for that year were rather low. So the forecast of what we will spend for this budget that we're talking about now amounts to $31.8 million off the top of my head, which is actually about $5 million of what happened this past summer, that lag I was talking about.
Okay.
And the rest is a combination of the accumulation of previous disasters in earlier fiscal years.
All right.
Thus, the 2020 floods, for example, are represented in that number.
On page 181, Mr. Lacroix or anybody talks about the consumption of inventory. I'm just not sure why there's a nil amount there. Is that something that we only find out after the fiscal year end?
Yeah, thank you, sir, Mr. Chair. Also something I touched on briefly, but I will clarify. So the PPE task force, the personal protective equipment task force, was created in April of 2020. It bought a bunch of stuff.
That's it.
And it is expending most of that equipment. It also receives some of it from donations from business owners. So the forecast for the upcoming year is that the task force will collapse in terms of providing free of charge personal protective equipment to non-healthcare sectors, clients that I discussed earlier on, and will sit on an inventory of 60 days of each of those items and cycle them through as they expire, building on some efficiencies in collaboration with the Alberta Health Services Agency. And that cost is $1.2 million to maintain the task force. But in terms of acquiring new PPE equipment for the purpose of distributing it to Albertans, we should, heaven forbid, be out of that business.
Okay, so you're not acquiring any, and that's why there's no number there?
Correct.
Okay. Third, on page 182, Safety Codes Council. There's no number there for voted supply, but there is entities amount not voted. I'm just not sure why there's why it's not voted and not in voted supply for Safety Coast
Mr.
Council.
Balderson? Yeah.
Mr. Chair, the reason why there's no voted amount is Safety Coast Council is a statutory vote, so they have nothing's for voting, everything's in the non-voted. It's just the way the entity is set up. It's Safety Coast Council, it's a non-voted entity, so their pure activities, the $15 million that you see, is the total amount of expenditures for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
With regard to the POC, of course, very active during the pandemic. Was there learnings in 2020, 21, 22 that have been built into this budget line items that have been built into this budget? Expenditures, I guess.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chair, while I would proudly say that we have an institutionalized feedback loop built into the operations of the POC, or the Provincial Operations Center, and that we learn all the time from our own doings, other ministries, and as I alluded to earlier, other provinces and territories. There are none really that translate in additional costs or budget line items this year. That said, you will recall that the POC, or the Operations Center, was scheduled to move into a new build under your government. That policy decision was made to retrofit an existing building, the Muriel Stanley Venn building, to the tune of $3 million. We've occupied that building now during the course of late summer, early fall. We moved into that new facility, which is about less than 5 minutes from the old one. But it is not what I would call at full operational capability yet, as there's a few information technology kind of issues need to be worked. So if there's anything I've learned, though, in my lengthy military career before I transitioned to the Alberta government, is that I will not relinquish the old Provincial Operations Center until I'm 100% certain that the new one will sustain a major disaster, or again, concurrent natural disasters. So we will not risk that and put that on the back of Albertans. So we should be, I would say, probably ready to go sometimes this month at full operational capability, fully poised to respond, and truly hoping that we don't really have to use it all that much, but prepared nonetheless.
Great. So what is that, about 7-8 months since the summer when you started occupying it?
Exactly, sir. And then there's a mix of sprinkle some COVID in there, and some wheeling and dealing with Alberta infrastructure. Supply chains being affected, actually, in terms of some of the IT equipment that we were supposed to receive at whatever time, and the project manager, infrastructure in this case, being late to need through no fault of their own. But we are where we are.
Good. Thank you.
Yep, no problems.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, but I wonder if we could please just keep focusing on a little bit. So outcome 4 is Alberta's emergency ready and resiliency to the impact of disasters. One of those is 4.2 of outcome 4 is lead the implementation of a provincial hazard identification and risk assessment framework to help inform disaster risk reduction decision making. Now, we know last year we were very fortunate in the fact that it was so dry, and we had a massive drought across most of the province, and yet we didn't have what I would classify as major forest fires. However, we are seeing already that moisture levels are quite low, even though we've had a lot of snow. It's not necessarily giving the results, depending on what area in the province you're talking about. I'm just wondering, I mean, we've seen MMP reports for response to a disaster, and what could we learn from that and all those kinds of things. Currently, what are you working on, knowing that we are probably seeing what's happened in BC and the fact of what our current climate is in Alberta potentially due for a disaster? What kind of programming or decisions are being made right now to try to mitigate that risk as much as possible?
I'll go again. Thank you for that question, Mr. Chair. So, as part of that learning mechanism, and also subject to an Auditor General report, the agency, or I guess the ministry, but the agency in this respect, was charged with the development of the hazard identification and risk assessment. So we like to call it the HIRA. So the HIRA was developed, and it is essentially a process, a tool by which we've developed a standardized method to identify, assess disaster risk. It is nested in the Treasury Board risk management architecture. Our piece of that pie, if you will, is focused on risk, disaster identification. And there are a number of fingers in that proverbial pie. So,
sorry for the interruption. We'll now move to a 10-minute segment if you're wishing to go back and forth with the minister.
Minister, is it okay to go back and forth, please?
At your service.
Okay, thank you.
10 minutes, Mr. Barnes. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Drew Barnes, MLA, Cypress Medicine Hat. Thank you, Minister, and thanks to your team for all the work you do for us in Alberta. It's appreciated. I, too, want to start on Alberta Emergency Management Agency. I'm on page 91. And I'm just wanting to, a couple of questions around it. I want to give Albertans the true picture of the budget. And of course, 2020-21 actual was $309 million. Forecast this year is $179 million. And now we're estimating $102 million for each of the next 3 years. I'm wondering why we're so confident that, you know, that like obviously the average between 2021 and 21-22 is more like 250, and we're less than half. That's surprising, especially 3 years in a row. Is that giving Albertans the true picture? And secondly, you know, there's a lot of hardworking individual emergency management people in all of our municipalities. I'm kind of curious and hoping to hear what collaboration, what support, what you guys do with, you know, all the people around the province with the same needs. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I can take the first question. The reason why in 2020-21 it's $308 million, and then for the current year and the years going on to $102 million, the biggest reason is the disaster recovery program. So in 2021, there was $195 million of disaster recovery program expenditures in there. So that's the one piece of it. And we had some consumption of PPE inventory, and the other small change was a $23 million increase in 911 call centers. But really, to answer your question, Mr. Chair, it's the 308 had a lot of disasters in it. We don't budget for disasters; they don't show up here. So that's the reason why it goes all the way down to 102 million for 22-23 onwards. It's really the disaster that's in the 308 million.
I guess you would characterize this as a lagging indicator as opposed to a leading indicator. It's a recollection of what we're mopping up from the past.
I'm fortunate to be here 10 years though, and I see this as a problem all the time. I'm pretty sure I remember from other years' budgets that we've always underestimated the cost of our emergencies. And if our goal is to give our taxpayer, our contributor, a true picture, maybe we're not doing that. So how about the collaboration with local emergency municipality preparedness officers?
Well, I will say there's obviously nobody can predict the disasters that may come up in the future in the emergencies. So it's hard to budget for, but there's a contingency in Treasury Board and Finance. You might want to ask that minister about when you get a chance to do that. Okay. But
MLA Barnes, Mr. Chair. In terms of collaborating with the municipalities, you know, I guess one thing I always tell the team at AEMA is training for the Olympics during the Olympics is usually a bad idea. And to that effect, we are, as I mentioned before, intimately connected with the emergency managers of those municipalities through a variety of tools. Probably the key one is our field officers deployed across the province of First Nation field officers deployed across the province. And what we do for them is to make sure that they have the tools to do the job, the knowledge, the capacity, the standards, to be able to respond to a disaster at their level and then connect into the wider emergency management architecture across the province. So to that end, we have imposed a bit of doctrine on them, which is not always that palatable, but there's a bit of a go back to school component to this. And then they have to learn the incident command system, which is what is used by FEMA in the US, for example, and is essentially the national standard to deal with an emergency. We also have partnered with NATE to conduct a yearly academy to connect all those municipalities. And actually, if there's anything good with COVID, is we can do a lot of stuff remotely now. So our participation numbers are huge, through the roof, because people don't have to move to take this training here in Edmonton. So we just conducted that last month, actually. We're also submitted a draft Alberta emergency plan last year that I hope I'll be able to bring before the minister, actually before the end of the month. And this is essentially the playbook on how to respond to an emergency in our province. And it was consulted extensively with all municipalities. Some, of course, have a lot more horsepower, so to speak, to deal with a New York-sized phone book. But they also are encouraged, and we facilitate collaboration throughout regions of Alberta to leverage each other's capabilities. So hopefully this gets tabled by the end of the month. The minister signs off on, but we've trialed and tested that last year. Again, knock on wood, we were lucky in terms of disasters, but we didn't have to test ride a new emergency plan in the middle of what BC actually went through last summer and fall. Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you for that answer. Still on page 91, 3 or 4 lines higher, federal grant programs. I have exactly the same concern. In 2020, 2021, $820 million spent by the contributors of Alberta. Forecast this year, $524 million. But now each of the next 3 years, we're budgeting $293, $284, and $270 million. Are we I presume these are matching third or half grants from the feds. Are we expecting, did the feds front end load a lot of infrastructure or municipal programs? Are you expecting the feds to do less? And now I don't know if this is accurate, but I have heard criticism from time to time that the provincial government of Alberta has missed the opportunity to join in a federal government program. Are we in danger of missing something, or again, are we in danger of not representing the true picture to the taxpayer of Alberta?
Mr. Chair, so for the federal grant program, for the $820 million, there was the one-time, so on page, the estimate's 177, there's $576 million into the Safe Restart Agreement municipal operating support transfer, so that's why that number is so high. That was during COVID. There was the $576 million, which was half funded from the federal government at $303 million. And then when you look at the reason why it goes from 295 up to 524 from 21-22, that goes up by $229 million. The main reason why, it's two reasons. One is the one-time Canada Community Building Fund, the $244 million that was given last year, and that was offset by just the cash flows on ISIP. So really it's two answers. One of them is in 2021, Mr. Chair, there was a one-time Safe Restart during COVID-19, and then and the reason the 21-22 is so much higher is the one-time Canada Community Building Fund top-up that was given in 21-22.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I appreciate it. Don't know if I have the right department, the right angle here, but please let me try. I hear criticism from time to time from municipalities that the Alberta government no longer pays their share of property taxes on buildings they own and leases. Is that under the purview of this department, and are you conscious of the concerns that are out there amongst municipalities of how this hardship is passed to other ratepayers?
Yeah, it's the GPOT program. There's no change to that program this year, but you are not wrong in saying that at one point the government paid 100% of the tax equivalent, and at this point we pay 50%. That did not change this year, but the way you characterized it at one point we did is true.
So it's not going to change for this year, you said, sir?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you. I think the biggest concern, my next question is different. I think the biggest concern from Alberta families and Albertans right now is inflation. How concerned is this department about inflation, your costs, and going forward on municipalities?
Well, I guess we're concerned about it. I will say to you that is one of the reasons that we front-end loaded the MSI, some of it from this year and next year into last year. And part of the reason that COVID was both the reason and the cause, because the reason that there was an opportunity to maybe pay less last year, the year before, for infrastructure was because of COVID, because the economy was so bad. It was also the reason why we needed to actually get more people working, because there were so many people not working during COVID. So that was kind of an anti-inflationary measure, both the paying in advance share of this year's MSI and last year's MSI last year, and it's also along with that through another $500 million at municipalities to build infrastructure last year. So, yeah, obviously, inflation's a concern always.
Thank you, Minister. We'll now move on to a 5-minute block for questions from the Government Caucus. Do you wish to combine your time with the Minister for full 10 minutes?
You good? No?
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, so I gave you a heads up there last time on the oil and gas taxes. So, last year, your ministry had indicated that several rural municipalities claimed they were owed at least $245 million in unpaid property taxes to the province. And last session, our legislature had passed a Bill 77, the Municipal Government Restoring Tax Accountability Amendment Act, to address this and other issues. I guess my first question is, are unpaid taxes by oil and gas companies still, a significant issue for rural municipalities here in this upcoming fiscal year?
Yes. The municipalities were very happy with Bill 77 as we did it. We worked with the municipalities, we worked with the industry, we worked with everybody, and they all agreed it was a good idea. Some good ideas don't work as well as you want them to. So the problem is almost as big now as it was then. So I'm in ongoing conversations with the municipal leaders to strategize together on what else we might be able to do to help them get paid the tax dollars that they deserve and are legitimately and legally owed. So this is as they say, the best laid plans of mice and men. I talked to everybody, did lots of comms. Like I said, when you do something like this and you had both the municipalities who are trying to collect the money and the industry that are supposed to pay the money, or at least the main industry are agreeing it's a good idea, you'd think it would work. So far, it hasn't really. I mean, it hasn't not worked at all, because some municipalities have told me that they've actually were able to get payment agreements made with their oil and gas companies, but there's been as many continuing defaults as there has been. So maybe it stopped the bleeding, if you will, stopped making it worse, but it hasn't. There's still a big amount of unpaid oil and gas taxes that have to be paid, and we'll continue to communicate with the municipalities and look for whatever the next step might be.
Yeah, I mean, obviously for those that have went bankrupt or in receivership, there's not really a whole lot you can do there. But I think before I left the house,
I'm told there's about 50% of the amount owed that is owed by operating companies. And with the current price environment, I would say to you, no excuse. There's no excuses. So I can tell you that, well, we made a big effort on Bill 77 to do this, and we all had high hopes. It would appear that we're going to have to do some more work.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when I left the house, oil was at about 124 WTI. Gas at close to $5.
But whether, I mean, until it gets down to zero, but whether gas and oil is expensive or inexpensive, we all have to pay our taxes.
Right.
Including,
So I guess
including
that's
all
kind
of us
of
in this room.
leads me to the next question. I mean, is there a mechanism then to enforce that? And I guess what is the ministry doing to ensure that financial sustainability? I guess there's also been COVID too. There's probably some overhanging COVID costs and some that may still come forward. And plus you got the unpaid taxes. There's some supply chain issues that may lead to inflationary problems with infrastructure projects. You know, so I just, from this perspective, I guess what's the ministry doing to just help with that financial sustainability?
Well, interesting, you're actually more up to date with this question than you might think you are. I had a phone call, actually my staff probably doesn't know this because it happened like yesterday. I had the president of RMA and he said this is still as big a problem as it was. And I committed to him that I would work with them again and look for the next solution, whatever that might be. And he said, great, because we need this to happen. So there you go.
Yeah.
What we all thought would work hasn't yet.
Yeah.
So we're going to try something else. I don't know what that is. If you're going to say what that, I don't know. If you know what that is, you should tell me. But because we really want to help and we are committed to working with municipalities to find a way.
Okay. But this is probably not the best spot to have a brainstorming session. So what I'll do is I'll cede my time to MLA Yao and let him take over.
Thank you, Minister. I'd like to thank you and your staff for coming here tonight, answering our questions and shedding a little more light into your department and how the budget's affecting it. As was mentioned, last year the legislature passed Bill 77, the Restoring Tax Accountability Act, to restore a special lien on linear property in the event that the company owning the property is refusing to pay their property taxes. The RMA has estimated that over $200 million remained outstanding before the bill's introduction, which is crippling some municipalities, especially in the northwest and southeast of our province in Alberta here. I know my constituency, I was getting many phone calls about the problem the rural municipalities were having trying to collect these taxes. So the unpaid oil and gas taxes have been an issue for years, including under the NDP, who did absolutely nothing when they were in power to try to fix the situation. This is a shame because most of the wealth in this province is generated in rural Alberta. I know the Rural Municipalities Association was grateful for the introduction and passage of Bill 77 after years of NDP neglect. The simple question is it working, Minister?
And I would say not as well as we would like it to be working. The recent conversations with the president of RMA tells me that the outstanding debt is pretty close to what it was when Bill 77 passed. So I guess we'll have to do some work with them to see whether I wouldn't say it's not working at all because some municipalities have told me personally it has helped. But the fact that the number hasn't gone down tells me that for every municipality that Bill 77 has helped, that much unpaid oil and gas taxes has accumulated somewhere else. So I am committed to work with the municipalities, particularly have had conversation with the RMA president, and we're committed to working together to look for the next possible solution. And because it's important. The municipalities do such important work. They can't do it without collecting their tax revenue, and apparently we're going to have to work with them to help them collect that tax revenue. So what that looks like today, I don't know. It's just kind of pretty fresh news for us that it's not working as well as we hoped it would. In fact, severely fresh. So now we'll dig in and start all over again.
Okay. My next question, I'm not sure if it's fair or not, but what I was going to ask was if the response was that it wasn't working very good, I was going to ask if you or if any of your staff would have any idea of what other steps could be taken in order to try to see if we could get these unpaid taxes paid in some manner. Would anybody like to try now?
We're on the hunt. We're committed to doing it. I don't know if anybody's, all I can tell you is I'm committed to working with the municipalities, and I got amazing staff, so when we get together with them, we'll find a way to try to help.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. I'd like to pass my time on to MLA Guthrie. MLA Getson.
Perfect. Well, thank you, MLA Rain and Minister. I'm going to jump to page 173 of the budget estimates and talking about contingency. So 2021-22 forecasted $70.51 million of spent contingency funds. However, there's nothing been allocated this year. And a couple parts to the question here. First, what's the mechanism to come up with contingency? My prior life, it was based on classification of estimate. You do a risk matrix, you run a Monte Carlo simulation, and you tap it on the end. What's the methodology for coming up with contingency? And then maybe the second part of the question, given time, how do we allocate contingency, potential disasters or otherwise? So I guess first part of the question is how do we come up with the contingency value?
How do we come up with a contingency value? Deputy, can you?
So the contingency funding is allocated to Treasury Board and Finance, so it's in their estimates. We do know that it is substantial this year, I think $1 billion. So that number is derived by Treasury Board as hopefully sufficient capacity for contingencies that do arise.
And in the event that the contingency doesn't cover, and I guess back to Mr. Lacroix's wheelhouse, in the case that value doesn't cover it, do you do another cash draw, or how does that work to get garner more value or contingency value?
Yeah, that'll be a bit of a game time decision. What I mean is if some things you can't avoid paying for, and if an unexpected emergency crops up.
Sorry to interrupt. We'll now move on to 10 minutes of the opposition. You want to go back and forth with the minister again? Minister? Go ahead, Mr. Ceci.
Just on page 179, I'm looking at 2013 Alberta flooding liability retirement 11.1, and the explanation on 176 talks about responsible for processes related to Southern Alberta Flood Disaster Recovery Program and Regional Municipality of Wood Buffalo Disaster Recovery Program. And that number is estimated at $4,764,000. First, can somebody explain what the process is identified there for that liability retirement line item is?
So Mr. Chair, that line item 11.1, that's for the 2013 Alberta flooding. So it's what year? 9 now. So really, the 4.7 represents our estimate of what we believe we'll be paying DRP claimants this year. So it's just that tail end of that very, very large disaster. There's a few recipients that are still there. So it's our estimate of what we're going to pay this year to recipients.
Okay. And do you anticipate that being an line item in 23-24?
Mr. Chair, I don't know at this time, but essentially what we do is we look at what's left in that accrual, and we'll so right now it's 4.7 million. Well, if there is an event where we think it's going to be a little bit more than that, we would come in the year for a supplementary estimate. Right. But right now it's 4.7 for the 22-23, and going forward, it's undetermined at this point in time.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, if I may add very briefly, the intent is to close that out as soon as we can, but we don't want to let or leave needy Albertans without funds that they're eligible for. So that's why there's always this lagging amount for arguably maybe too long from a financial and accounting purpose, but again, defaulting to the needs of Albertans.
Okay. Is the actual construction of raising the ground or putting some other devices in place part of infrastructure or a different ministry? The cost?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. So the Alberta Emergency Management Agency, of course, is in the business of not only recovery from disasters, but in the business of resiliency. There have been some funds made available for mitigation, for example. I could give you a good example, would be $11 million authorized for Fort McMurray to move a neighborhood at risk, Ptarmigan Court, away from a floodplain. It also does not talk about any recovery program monies given to individuals, businesses, municipalities can be used by the recipients of those funds to actually move their properties out of harm's way, right? But mitigation mostly, if we talk about floodway mitigation type of work, would be the responsibility, of course, of environmentalism and parks.
Thanks.
Yeah, probably improved by environmental parks and probably built by transportation.
The business plan on, business plan, page 90, speaks to let me see, Safety Codes Council, and then there's a line item on 91, kind of tracking 15.5 million. Would that be the place? With COVID, we've learned a lot of things, and one of the things that has been talked a lot about is the adequacy of air ventilation systems. Would Safety Codes Council be the place where there'd be that discussion or that change that would potentially bring new regulations or new rules into place?
Can I ask Mr. Wasick to...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sean Wasick, Assistant Deputy Minister, Technical and Corporate Services. And I would say to the member, yes. So part of the discussions that happen is in the development of a new edition of a building code is proposals for emerging issues, new technology, a new need to address that. And so the Department of Municipal Affairs, along with the Safety Codes Council, does participate in federal, provincial, territorial, both policy and technical committees, alongside the National Research Council and CSA Group as an example. And those are very active discussions there. Of course, that would also include colleagues from Alberta Health as well, but it is a very live discussion. I can say that over the course of the last 6 months, there have been conversations beginning to present evidence about different types of ventilation system requirements and how and if that's already reflected in the code or how that could be enhanced in future editions.
Thank you for that answer. Okay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And so I'd like to go to page 90 again of your business plan. So outcome 3. Albertans are protected with safe buildings, homes, and communities. 3.2, represent Alberta and its interests, including the reduction of trade barriers along the development of national and international codes for potential adoption in Alberta. Just wondering if you can expand a little bit on that key objective. What examples of trade barriers would be potentially demonstrated? National or international codes that we might be looking at. I'm thinking maybe wood structures, but I'm curious as to how you identify this key objective.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I can expand on that a little bit to give some examples. So one thing it's important to note is in Alberta we've already have what's called a timely code adoption framework. So essentially that means that there's a recognition that the research and the development that happens at national or international levels that Alberta participates in is already a good foundation for the newest and the best consideration that goes into a code. There's also a recognition in that it offers an opportunity for alignment. So Alberta, as an example, in the last year, signed agreement under the Canada Free Trade Agreement, which is the regulatory reconciliation of trade tables, to work to have alignment, commitment to have alignment on building and fire codes across the country. So that's an example of the kind of commitment that's been made in the last year, as well as that timely code adoption framework. So Both of those are continuous. Each new edition of the national codes that is being developed and then published is worked on both from Municipal Affairs but also from the Safety Codes Council to examine that to ensure that it is still a fit for our unique circumstance. But the underlying commitment there is to have alignment across the country so that you have labor mobility, that Alberta is able to attract workers, then they don't have to retrain when they come to this province. Manufacturers know the requirements that exist within the province, they're not having to then customize and adjust their operations and supply chains for a unique set of code requirements.
Thank you. Would you also then be able to elaborate on 3.1, align the safety systems to increase partner autonomy and accountability?
Certainly. Mr. Chair, I think the initiative underneath that objective is a good example of that, which is that the work that we're doing currently with the Safety Codes Council to examine risk-based approaches to inspections. And that would be seen through an accreditation framework. So in Alberta, Safety Codes Council has delegated authority to accredit different organizations across the province to deliver the services under the Safety Codes Act. The vast majority of those are municipalities, but you also have agencies and corporations as well. And so that initiative is an attempt to codify and develop a renewed framework that allows for data and information to come in to support those decisions around when and how frequent inspections occur. So it's the kind of decision-making that exists already with safety codes officers across the province, but it's attempting to bring in data and information where those authorities having jurisdiction have the capacity to do that. And so that there's clarity around when and how they're able to use anything from a database all the way up to artificial intelligence to then say what activity has a greater risk, both in terms of its frequency of failure, but also the impact of that potential failure, as well as the...
Thank you very much, sir, for your answers. We'll now move on to 10-minute rotation with back and forth with the minister from the independent member.
Back and forth again, please, Minister.
Let's do her.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chair. Again, on page 91, I'm on the top in the revenue section, premiums, fees, and licenses, up from 36 million to 51 million and then 63 million going forward. Big increase of 26 million. Are Albertan families paying that? What makes up premiums, fees, and licenses, please?
Okay, I think that is the 911 system. We passed a piece of legislation here in the last year where the fee on your cell phone bill, I think it went from 44 cents a month to 95 cents a month. That amounts to $23 million a year, and that is to go towards the upgrading of Alberta's 911 system as part of Canada's 911 system upgrade to a much higher level of service.
Sounds like money well spent. Have you monitored it? Are you happy with the results?
I don't know that we've started collecting the money in September. Please tell me what you know.
I'd be happy to add a bit there, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, we don't know, I guess, is the short answer of it. But what is being promised and sold to us by the federal government in terms of the next generation of 911 services provided through mobile phones for the most part is a much more robust and I would say user-friendly, that includes actually text messaging interchanges between people in need and the 911 Central. So I think it's long overdue. If the federal government is wrapping its arms around this particular challenge, good. But we will certainly hold them accountable for a quality product in the end. But there's no indication that they would underdeliver given the importance of such a file.
Okay, thank you.
It's a several-year program. As he said, it's going to go from just phoning 911 to be able to text for help, which is super important. For example, in the case of domestic violence, where if the perpetrator of the domestic violence can hear somebody calling for help, that can bring on more domestic violence, where this way a person get in a separate part of the house and text quietly to get help. And also for people on the road that might be in a car accident or an ATV collision, and they're not, where it actually will be GPS. So instead of having to describe to somebody on the 911 call where you are, they will know. Like right now within about 5 meters or something, like a real tight circle. So there's some severe improvements when it works, but it's not like it should be working now. They said it would be, what, 3-4 years to get it together. So this is the start of the 3-4 year process for that huge improvement.
Again, it sounds like money well spent. Good luck monitoring it. I remember hearing a few months ago that 90% of texts get returned in 5 minutes and only 10% of phone calls get returned in 5 minutes. So texting is obviously the preference. So well done. Sticking there under other revenue, I want to know what makes up under the other revenue component, 27 million every year, except for some reason 2020, 2021, it was an incredible 128 million. What comprises other revenue? Right in the top of page 91.
Mr. Chair, so the reason why that 128 million seems so high, there's a couple of reasons for that. So what we do each year for our disaster recovery programs, we'll make an estimate of what we think they're going to cost, and every year end we have a look at them. So during 2021, we actually decreased our estimated cost in the DRPs by $65 million. And when you do that, the revenue has to go somewhere. So $65 million of the 128 is from prior year disasters that we've estimated the cost to come down. And then the last piece is due to COVID-19. It was a donation of $38 million of revenue, a donation of $38 million of PPE from health. So that comes over at book value. So when you add those two together, that's $102 million of the $128 million is due to those two factors. And to answer your questions, what's in the 26? I'll give you Mr. Chair, I'll give you the bigger pieces. So in that $26 million, there's a designated industrial property assessment is $15.3 million, and the Alberta First Responders Radio Communication System is $9.5. The other smaller amounts are the Composite Assessment Review Boards for $880,000. Yeah, Improvement District 349, $375,000, and so the total of that is $26.2 million, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I want to back up a little bit too. In the expense column on page 91, in 2020, 2021, we had $499 million spent on the municipal stimulus program, and of course nothing going forward. I'm believing that this was the money put into shovel-ready projects for municipalities because of COVID. Please tell me how effective it was. Did it create a lot of jobs? Did it do a lot? Where are we at with that?
That was the what we call the $500 million, and 499, 115, but okay, that we furnished to municipalities to build infrastructure and to stimulate the economy and provide jobs during COVID, and we found this earlier. So there's over 500 projects, and $730 million worth of work is the municipalities in many cases added some of their own money to the projects because they're important. 50% of the funding roughly went to road and bridge projects. 21% roughly went to parks, sports, and recreation infrastructure. 15% to water, wastewater, stormwater, and other infrastructure, and some other stuff for affordable housing and other municipal buildings and facilities and repairs and stuff. So, you know what, I think it was probably largely well spent, and if nothing else, it caused employment at a time when Albertans were desperate for employment, and also would have improved the infrastructure, which was part of our government's objectives to set up Alberta for recovery, because let's face it, the economy rides on infrastructure. So all these infrastructure pieces, it's probably hard to quantify exactly how much GDP and employment that it caused, but I have no doubt it was money well spent, and I have no doubt that it's contributing today to the economy of Alberta.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, shout out to you guys for this plan in the city of Medicine Hat. They built some nice walking paths by my house, and they are really well used. So good decision by you and by them. Next, I want to tell you about a situation, and where is it in the budget? Cypress County. I represent the south part of Cypress County, and of course that surrounds the interprovincial park, Cypress Hills. And it's sort of an interesting situation, but it's awkward. Some people have put in some new biking trails and stuff through the forest, and the park is getting more and more used, but that means more and more health emergencies, more and more need for ambulances and that kind of thing. And it's very uncertain. Cypress County wants to provide the service. Cypress County is willing to send their volunteers to help, but the park is willing to help as well. And when I talk to Cypress County, there's a real communication, I don't know if it's a problem, it's just an uncertainty. Is there somewhere in the budget that money can be spent on handling these problems? Like obviously a summer village or a provincial park, it's not like two municipalities technically bumping into each other. Is there some way we can address this issue?
Well, the park thing is provincial park.
Provincial park.
So that'd be through the Environment and Parks Ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose if they want to partner on some of that, I guess I'd need to know more specifics.
Is there a way Cypress County, as an example, could ask for money to provide the emergency service?
Yeah, I can't guarantee you right now at 5 to 10 that we're going to say yes to that money, but they can ask. And we will be polite to them and listen carefully, and maybe based on what you described, there might be an opportunity for them in the park to ask together, or you know, through our ministry and environment and parks. I can't promise that would happen, but we'll listen.
Okay, thank you. And as a follow-up to the question from the MLA from Edmonton Manning, key objectives 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3. I have heard that the red tape cost in every new house in Alberta and in Canada could be as high as $140,000. Can we do something about that?
Member, thank you. We'll now move on to 5 minutes remaining questions with the government caucus, back and forth with the minister.
Are we good to go, Minister?
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you. So I just want to try to finish off on the contingency allocation. I appreciate how the contingencies come from Treasury. There's unallocated contingencies. Sounds like a very similar model. We've used some of it in the past for emergencies, so if we can, sir, just like to pick up on there. With the contingency values in the past and the allocations, what lessons learned do we have over the last couple of years here that are being applied to the contingencies and then the allocations going forward?
I think generally speaking, we've done our best to look at the historical level of draw out of the contingency fund, knowing that the historical draw may in no way represent what's needed this year.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't know what, and I'm not being sarcastic, I don't know what forest fires are going to happen. I don't know what floods are going to happen. I don't know what hailstorms are going to happen. Nobody does. So that's part of the reason I think that Treasury Board holds the contingency, because wouldn't be just our ministry that would need it. When a forest fire happens, if it happens in a municipality, like an urban municipality, there's a good chance that we might help with that service. If it happens out in the woods, probably agriculture and forestry. So, and again, the same thing with floods. If it happens in a municipality or where it affects municipal infrastructure, we could end up kind of involved. It's pretty random and pretty unpredictable where the contingency needs to go. So I think that's why the folks with the big bank accounts hold it, and rightly so, because we just can't predict when and where and how it's going to be needed.
No, perfect. Appreciate it, sir, and fully understand it when it comes to contingency allocations. You don't typically go back to the board unless you really have to. Maybe we can jump gears a little bit, sir, if you wouldn't mind, just to red tape. The last member just talked about that a little bit. I believe it's on outcomes and objectives 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. Red tape's a big deal. So really glad to see that the budget was balanced. Really glad to see the initiatives carrying forward. I'm going to give you a softball one, sir, because it's towards the end of the hour, bottom of the ninth, all that. Can you just identify some of the best red tape initiatives that have taken place in the last year and some that you're planning to do this year going forward?
Okay, let's see. We talked to industry panels. Just looking for an example out of municipal affairs. I think that's what the MLA is looking for specifically.
Yeah, just the red tape initiatives under municipal affairs. If there's some good news stories there, you can tell us what you're planning on doing
Sean,
going forward.
please. I think our safety codes person has some, could talk about some good work and what.
Good. This is good news. My constituents will like this.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and on behalf of colleagues across the table as well. So I'm pleased to highlight some of the successes that do enhance the competitive advantage. So one would be a variance that was issued under the gas code regulation that would allow for oil and gas producers to use professional engineers to verify the safety of their own equipment. That ability under the Safety Codes system, under the Safety Code Act, already exists. Safety Codes officers are able to evaluate an individual circumstance, and if something can't be met under the prescriptive part of the code, but there's an alternative solution that allows for equivalent safety, that authority and that ability already exists. But what this did was a provincial variance that recognized the unique operations and capacity that you have within certain oil and gas producers. And so it allowed for professional engineers, which again are subject to the requirements of their professional designation, to be able to do some of that inspection work themselves in-house. That's one example. Another example would have been the Safety Codes Act was amended to allow for the use of tall wood construction. So that is something that is expected to be in the next edition of the National Building Code, but there was a step taken to adopt that early, to allow for Alberta to get a step ahead and to have the use of tall wood construction with fire-resistant materials and the opportunity for sourcing of materials to a greater degree within Alberta. And, I think at the time the Alberta Forest Products Association estimated that change would, create about 60 jobs per construction site and up to 400 new jobs in sawmill and production sites as well. So there's a couple examples.
Perfect. And any other efficiencies maybe from the department that you've picked on, or any debottlenecking exercises you can come top of mind?
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me we're doing a varied inspection process where builders, et cetera, that do a great job will get inspected less often, and the ones that do a bad job get inspected more often, which hopefully will reward the good builders, not by letting them do a bad job, but by having them do less paperwork while they're doing a great job, and the ones that are doing a bad job might not be in business anymore to keep doing a bad job.
To interrupt on that good note, but I must advise the committee that the time allotted for consideration of the ministry estimates has concluded. I would like to remind committee members that we are scheduled to meet tomorrow, March 8th, 2022, at 9 a.m. to consider the estimates of the Ministry of Treasury Board and Finance. Thank you, everyone. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.